Hi, everybody. First live chat of Dynamo Sword Channel. As I mentioned in the post, I was thinking of doing a little Q&A and then maybe doing a grip wrap tutorial with you guys so you guys can check that out. If you're interested, yeah, definitely. So let's get it started. So the sword I was going to do a grip wrap on, which I kind of already started kind of the pre-work, is my Ronin Katana Italian arming sword. And I gripped this, I did a grip rewrap on this when I originally reviewed it, but I decided, to kind of change it up. That one was kind of a cheaper black leather I just had lying around. I kind of did it fast, and I wanted to do it with a little more detailed leather. And then, like I said, if you guys are in the chat and want to chat, then maybe we can figure out a color or something together if we get that far. But in the meantime, so this is live, so I apologize if I do have animals. So if there's a little background noise from the animals, I apologize, or my children are kind of settling for the evening while I'm doing this. So I apologize if there's any background noise. Aside from that, let's get started. So looking at this sword here, usually what I first like to do when I start a grip wrap is, of course, I do the linen cord wrap. Now, this is important because what that does is it kind of gives a barrier between the leather and the wood core. It also helps strengthen the wood core. So if it does, kind of split or crack, at least you have that kind of that epoxied linen underneath to kind of help kind of hold it together. Now, obviously, if it's a detrimental damage to the grip, then it won't matter because you're going to feel it's going to be loose and stuff. But at the same time, this is about hi, CJ. I'm just doing a live chat. Dynamo Sword Channel. I normally do sword reviews and I also have my sword news segment. And I haven't done a live chat yet, so I just thought I'd try a live chat. What I'll be doing in it, just to kind of give us something to do with if anyone wants to talk and ask questions, is just doing a grip wrap tutorial. So basically, most swords have a certain kind of grip wrap. European swords have leather, and normally with risers and stuff, and so I'm just going to show you guys how to do that. I do have a full tutorial that I did a few years ago on how to grip wrap a sword. That one was actually a disassembled handle because it had a construction method where you could disassemble the pommel. This one is just going to be on a solid sword. So this is another good kind of round 2 of that tutorial to show you guys how to do a leather grip on a fixed sword, which can be kind of difficult to some. So that's kind of what we're doing here. But yeah, so let's get started. So normally what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the risers. That's what's next. Now, as I mentioned, the linen cord, which is just a tedious, you wrap it. Then as you guys can kind of see, I draw and even out kind of where I'm going to have my risers. So I'm going to do a 3 riser configuration with this one. So just have a nice center riser to kind of catch the palm and kind of sync up between the ring finger and the pinky finger, as you can kind of see where it's going to rest. And then, so yeah. And then like this one's kind of a little bit on the longer side. You can almost use it two-handed. It's almost a 1.5 hand sword because of just how extra long the grip is with the pommel. So with those extra risers there, again, you get a nice riser in between those fingers to kind of help hold your grip. And that's what the risers are for, is, I mean, they can be for aesthetics, but primarily they're for, just kind of keeping your grip in place and having somewhere for it to hold. But anyway, so yeah. Let's pull out my leather and I just use leather cord for my risers. Pretty much just like a 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter, just kind of depends on how thick you want your risers. I like them a little on the smaller side. So normally what I'll do is I'll use a 1 millimeter, just it's a little thinner, a little more comfortable. Sometimes when you got a thicker one, it kind of can kind of mess with you. All right, just looking at some comments. Oh, hi. Well, thank you. Yeah. So the easiest way to do it is you know, have your little X-Acto knife, and what you do is you just kind of sit here and measure it out, because you're going to butt them up with glue or epoxy later. So you see, you just kind of line it up, and then you can just kind of give it a cut, and then you get that size, and you just size each around, and then that way when it's time to kind of glue them, you can butt them up just like that. All right, so, and then kind of look in here, we'll go to this one since it's only 3. Sometimes if you get really crazy, you know, you have multiple risers, like I have like the grip wrap tutorial I did a lot of risers. I think I did like 6 or 7 risers on that, so it was almost ridged. And I did that on purpose just to show kind of, you know, how tedious risers can be. I mean, you don't necessarily need risers if you don't want them, even if you find them uncomfortable. But yeah, so that's kind of, you know, with risers, and you know, and it can almost be like an art form. You know, it can be really nice and everything. So yeah. I don't forge. You know, I've never been a forge guy. You know, I just, you know, it's not that I don't have the knowledge. I just, or the training. I have a friend with a forge. I could forge if I wanted to. I'm just one of those that, you know, I enjoy swords. I don't really enjoy making them, I guess, or forging them. So that's kind of the difference between me and all that. So yeah. So anyway, yeah, let's continue on. So basically what we do is just take our super glue. I like to use this Gorilla brush and nozzle because it's, you know, it works 2 ways, because you can, you know, obviously just use it, you know, with standard super glue nozzle, but then also, especially for this, when it comes to like sword handles and stuff, you have this brush. So if you want to do a little brush on of your glue, that's really nice. And so basically what we'll do is, and I'll probably just use the nozzle in case some of you guys are watching and just want. So what I'll do is I'll just set a base of glue right here at the beginning, because I'm going to slowly go around it. So, you know, with the way these go, slow and easy is definitely the route to take. So we're just going to kind of line the leather up with the red, with the outline that I drew, flip it around, and then just kind of give it a little more glue as we go around, so it stays nice and in line and butted. Doesn't create too much problem, and go from there. And then we'll finish it up. Now, normally what I'll do is I'll leave that little end where they're going to butt up for last, because I do not want to kind of have it overlap. I want it to have a nice butt, because it'll show an indent on the outer leather, and we want it to be nice and cinched. So I'm just going to take a little bit of the end like that, and then we'll form it to where it butts up and rounds. Really easy. My favorite sword out of all of them, it's kind of fluctuating. You know, when I look at it, you know, I mean, it depends on the day, I guess, almost, because I like them all. And so, but if I was going to say that, you know, I have favorites for different reasons. Probably my most current favorite is probably this guy right here, which is the Royal Armories 14th century hand and a half sword, which is based off a really nice Type 12A that is housed in the Royal Armories, but for hundreds of years was in the arsenal of Alexandria in Egypt. And so yeah, really nice, beautiful sword, and a really nice one-to-one replica of the original. The last time I was at a Ren Fair, I actually wore this sword, and that's how much I like it. As far as long swords, that's probably my favorite long sword. As far as arming swords, I'm really digging this newer one I just picked up, the Windlass Seneschal, which is a really nice sword. Yeah, I did a review on this one that if anyone's interested, you can go check out. But yeah, it's really nice, nice handling arming sword. So, and then comes with a really nice grip. So unless you really want to, you don't have to do the customizing like I'm doing right now. Primarily, I do the customizing just because, I find it fun to do. And, it also adds a nice customization to the sword. It's like, I can tell, okay, well, this is my sword because, I did the grip wrap and things like that. And it definitely, kind of helps. Yeah, they're all real. And it's A Freak. Hey, what's up, bud? Yeah. Oh, you're answering that guy. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, if my head's down, go ahead and answer. I appreciate that. But yes, to the gentleman, and I'm sorry since your name's in a foreign language. 37 at. But yeah, they are not all of them are sharp because some of them do come blunted, but they are all fully functional high carbon steel, traditionally made. So yeah, none of them are like display. None of my swords back here are display only, or wall hangers as sometimes they're called. But yeah, let's get back to the grip wrapping. So do this bottom riser. Get the glue to set. And then let's work around. And then you just kind of trace the line. That's why I like to draw these, because not only does it keep it like to where it keeps it in sync to where you don't have like a crooked riser, which is, kind of, especially if you're, kind of OCD on how things are, kind of set and finished. That can really be an issue, I guess, for some people that they're not, properly, if it's a little lopsided or something, it can be a struggle. But yeah. All right, just finish wrapping that around, and then we'll let it sit for a minute. Also, if you're not a fan of obviously glue and stuff on your hands, definitely, usually you can wear like some, some gloves, or something like some neoprene gloves or something. And that just kind of helps with if you don't like getting glue on your fingers or dye on your fingers, because this is definitely, your hands are going to get a little sticky and dirty with this type of job. It's just kind of goes with the program. Oh, I'm using the Gorilla Glue brush and nozzle. That's what I like, because I like the brush. Honestly, I'm kind of being normally I'd use the brush because it goes by quicker, but I'm just kind of doing it the other way just to kind of show everybody how it can be done just through, even just with, your run-of-the-mill super glue will work. What's my name? My name is David, and I am my channel is Dynamo Sword Channel. And I've been doing sword reviews and talking medieval history and stuff for quite a few years now. But now I'm kind of taking a bigger step on my channel. I'm doing new segments called Sword News, which is featuring a lot of the major vendors and stuff around. But yeah, it's anyway. So yeah, we're just sitting here and I'm just hanging out and chatting with people and doing some sword grip wrapping tutorial for a little side thing, I guess, and then just answering questions for anyone has. So definitely ask away. If you have any questions, let me know. I am not shy to ask or answer questions. So yeah, definitely. Actually, just to kind of show a freak what I was talking about. So that's what's cool about this is it's got the little super glue brush. So get that, and then might be able to get the glue on a little easier. Get it all lined up. And then brush away. I am new to swords and stuff. Is there anything I should know? I want to start collecting. Really, what you should know is just who to buy from, what to buy. You know, there's a lot of different swords on the market, a lot of, you know, stuff. You kind of got to decide why you want to collect and what you want to collect. If you, so if you are like really wanting to like focus, for example, on like martial arts practicing or anything like that, you want to get into Hema or you know, Kendo or Kenjutsu for like the Japanese side, or you know, any like Jian or Dao in Chinese. You know, basically, you know, what you really want to focus on is obviously getting a sword that complements your martial arts training. And normally, like with you know, Hema, you would get, you know, if you're doing like some Hema institutes do like synthetic swords, like the harder foam stuff, kind of like the live action role play stuff. Do I need permission to own a sword in your country? Here in America, no. I'm not sure where you are, but as far as the United States, unless there's state-specific laws, there's nothing regulating you from owning a sword. A sword technically falls into your right to bear arms, Second Amendment. So. Now, there is certain laws in other places that, yeah, do. But anyway, long story short, so yeah, basically, if you want something to hang on the wall, you know, as far as like starting your collection, you know, just get a wall hanger. Just remember, it's meant for the wall. You know, take it down, look at it. It's pretty, sitting in your lap watching a movie or something, you know, Lord of the Rings or something. But overall, if you're going to get something that's functional, just be aware that it is functional. And there is also taking care of swords, you know. And I got a great video on sword maintenance, like how to polish and clean your swords, which is important. That's another thing I like to kind of lay out is that if you are you know, into serious collecting, want something that's more traditional or handmade, you're going to need to clean it because it's made of high carbon steel and it will rust. Touching it with fingers will stain it, as you can kind of, you know, if I leave my fingerprints on here, you can start seeing fingerprints and things like that. So you got to be really careful with that. You know, that's just kind of one of the caveats of it. Now, if you're wanting something that's low maintenance, yeah, get something stainless steel that is display only, because it won't take as much maintenance, especially with a lot of the handle materials. Because basically, if you get, like, for example, this sword, you know, which is made of high carbon steel, and then you have these are stainless steel actually, so that's kind of nice. A lot of the Chinese swords do have stainless steel fittings, like this Ronin, which do help with maintenance, because, you know, especially when your hands are primarily, you know, on the hilt, it doesn't really gain. But anyway, yeah. So, oh, hey, just got here. All right, thanks for showing up. Thanks for watching. But yeah, so that's kind of it. You just kind of as far as like taking care of swords, like you're going to want to get like some oil or polishing paste or something like that. Like I said, later on, you know, when you're done watching the live feed, if you want to go in to my channel and check out that tutorial on cleaning, then yeah. Hey, by the sword, hey freak, hi guys. Thanks for showing up. Maybe I'll teach you a thing or two about you know, grip wraps. So anyway, but yeah, as you can see, now I got the risers finished, and it didn't take long. You know, I think I talked more than it took to put them on. But anyway, oh, absolutely, CJ. Yeah, ask me any questions. Yeah, feel free. You know, shoot me a message, or if you're interested, you know, I'm on Sword Buyer's Guide Forum. So if you want to join that, you know, there's me and a lot of great others. Buy the swords on there. Matthew Jensen, who I just did a live stream with, he's on there. There's a lot of great, you know, sword guys. It's really nice sword community, and, you know, answering questions and stuff. So you're going to get your sword in 2 weeks. So like you just ordered one, or that's like kind of an estimated thing. But anyway, back to the sword handles. So yeah, so now we're going to move on to the leather. And this is where, you know, kind of it's a pick your poison thing. How much is a sword? Well, it depends on the sword. Swords are kind of like anything, you know, it depends on, you know, what you want and what you can afford. You know, obviously there's a low end spectrum of swords. Most of like the display swords and things like that are going to be, you know, around $50 to $100. Once you start getting into the functional swords, you're looking at $150 to, you know, $300 for what we consider the you know, the budget, I guess, or low tier swords. I mean, this one technically, and it's a really nice sword. Technically, it qualifies as a budget or low tier sword, because this sword goes for about, you know, $300, $350 retail when you buy it new. Most of the swords that I review on my channel do. I'm not really a high-end guy because, you know, it's just never been my foray. And, you know, not that I don't appreciate them. It's just, you know, I've always been kind of the budget guy, and I don't mind reviewing the budget swords, especially for you guys that might also be on those lower budgets. But yeah, so normally, you know, $300, $400 is where kind of the budget tier ends. Mid tiers, you know, that $450, $500-ish up to about $800 or so. And then it pretty much anything over $1,000 is considered high tier. You know, and that's when you start seeing, you know, kind of the more refined details and stuff. Also, that's usually where you find custom swords. Now, you sometimes got to be careful with custom swords, because custom swords don't always mean, especially with the high price, don't always mean that it's going to be, you know, similar to a high end, you know, production sword. Sometimes with, you know, kind of custom smiths, I mean, they're personal, that's their personal job. So, you know, you can't expect them to have, you know, excellent refinement like a Valiant Armory or Albion or something. You go through them because not only is it quality and it's custom, but you also want to kind of support them. You know, sometimes you could pay $1,000 for a custom sword, and it's similar quality to more of a budget sword, just because that's the level of the smith's skill. But because he's a smith and he has to make a living, you know, he'll you know, he's got to charge as expected. You know, it's not, you know, he's not doing it for free. He's trying to make a living. So that's kind of something to respect. Me and my dad have been looking into it. Awesome. Okay. Well, cool. All right, CJ. Yeah, definitely. Like, look through your dad. You know, a good website to look at swords, especially here in the United States, is Cult of Athena. You know, they're a really great sword shop, a really great vendor. You know, I always recommend them because they have the big three that I always, you know, recommend, and that is that everything that they say is in stock is actually in stock in their warehouse. They don't drop ship. It's like they don't say, oh, I'm going to sell you this sword, but it's going to ship out from over here and then it's going to go to you. So I'm just kind of the middle dealer. Anything that they sell, they have in their warehouse. Secondly is they do offer a sharpening service. So if you are wanting to use or cut with your swords, yeah, definitely they'll they'll sharpen it for you for a fee. The other one is pre-shipment inspections. And what's really cool with that is, and I appreciate that is that they normally check everything before they put it in the warehouse and get it ready for being in stock anyway. But if you do ask in like the comments of your order, hey, could you please look over the sword, make sure everything's nice and tight and there's no issues, they'll do that. They'll open it up, they'll look at it and double check it before they ship it out. So that's a really nice customer service side of it. So definitely look at cultofathena.com and CJ and check them out with your dad and see if there's something they like. They got a lot of swords and a lot of different options, from display stuff to functional stuff to the high-end expensive stuff that I was talking about. So yeah, I think you can pretty much find whatever you're looking for, from European to Japanese, everything, they got it on there. But yeah, Gerald, I bought one once and it turns out it wasn't even metal and it was 120. That's the risk, and that's what sucks with online, because and that's why I said it's always good to go through reputable vendors. It's always good to get feedback from reviewers like me and others on like YouTube or on the internet, that they're doing reviews and giving advice and stuff, because we're basically doing the dirty work for you. Basically, we get the swords, so we know what they're like. So that way, if you're concerned, or let's say there is a sword you like, let's just pull a random one off the shelf. Here, this is a neat one that I reviewed. This is the Graham Viking sword, and this one's pretty cool. And let's say you like this sword and you want it, and so, all right, where do you look for it? Well, you'll Google search Graham Viking sword, boom, it's going to pop up and you're going to see like 4 or 5 different websites that sell it. So who do you buy from? Well, and that's kind of where you guys might not know. So that's where, coming to us, now that you're like, ooh, cool, I like this sword, and you find it on a good price, then you can kind of research and look it up. And for example, you look up the Graham Viking sword, and here you see, Dynamo Sword Channel with its review, and you can watch the review and get some details on what I think about it, and if it's the sword for you, because not every sword's for everyone, and even a sword that I might like might not be for you, might not be something you do like. So that's kind of the thing with it. So when you're kind of browsing swords, it's like definitely research. That's how I am when I buy swords. That's how I've always been. And it's just smart shopping for anything, but definitely with swords, if you're going to, really invest in swords, because swords can be expensive. And like Gerald just said, I mean, is $120 a lot of money? No, but it can be a lot of money to some. It can be nothing to other people, but either way, it's an investment. It doesn't matter if it's $50 or $100 or $5. Nobody likes to lose money and lose money on anything. So if they're if that's the problem, then that you have, it sucks. Nobody wants to lose any money. So I guess that's the point of that. But anyway, let's get back to this. So now we're going to move on to the leather, and I already kind of got sorta a piece of leather sort of cut, but it's not shivved. So I need to shiv it. And so what I'll probably do is I'll just get it measured out and cut. Now, how I do that, normally I have a cutting board with measurements, and I'm pretty sure I lin it out, and I forgot that I did before I did this video. So now we're going to kind of do it the old school way with a little measuring tape with this. So yeah, so what we got going on here is I'm going to basically measure the diameter of the handle, and that's going to kind of give me a general idea of where I want. Now, the important thing is, and this is where some people forget, you want to measure around your risers because your risers add that much more thickness. So if you measure the handle, like let's say that the handle diameter, just the grip itself is 3.5 inches. Well, you know, you got to look at it and you got to say, oh, wow, that 1 millimeter riser actually adds it up to, you know, almost 4 inches. And then it's like, whoa, okay. Because what's going to happen is that when you wrap your handle is here, let me see if I have a smaller piece of leather to kind of simulate this. All right, so like this. Let's say that you're wrapping your handle and you get around to the end. Now, the seam is what matters because seams matter. Now, you can have a really nice invisible seam, glued and butted. You know, some manufacturers like to stitch their seams. But overall, when you do the seams, like I said, if you want a nice butted seam, you're going to want to measure it appropriately. If it's too short, you're going to get around to that end of the handle, and it's going to be kind of like this. Let's say I was going to do this way too small piece of leather on this sword. So see, as you can see, it doesn't meet up. So, I screwed up and cut it too short. What do I do now? And that's where you don't want to deal with that. So it's always nice to give yourself a little extra room, but you definitely always want to measure around the risers because again, this leather is going to wrap around the risers and you're going to get that nice indentation and that. So do I have other cool things like spears and knives? Yeah, absolutely. You can't really see them in the shot here because it's kind of zoomed into the table, so I can you know, kind of focus on the sword on the grip wrapping. But yeah, like right here, I have this cool mingache that is a windlass musketeer side, so it's a parrying dagger to extenuate actually this guy right here, which is my windlass musketeer rapier, which traditionally is what would be known as a Spanish Bilbao hilt, which means it just has that clamshell style design. So very similar to like kind of like the cup hilt rapiers, but then it's more clammed out. And so yeah, and that was like uniquely Spanish normally, but obviously other regions could use it, or you know, hell, buy a Spanish sword and you're using the Spanish style hilt. So even though some designs were region exclusive, it doesn't necessarily mean that you know, other regions couldn't use it. You know, I mean, sword importing was actually a real thing, and there was a lot of you know, importing that was done. So normally, like with a mingache, what you would do is this would be your parrying dagger. So you know, you're using the rapier, and then you know, you're kind of blocking and parrying with the parrying dagger, and that's why it also kind of has more. This one has what was known as a sail hilt, or which is kind of D-shaped. So a sail fin hilt, and what that was is that just gives you that nice full hand protection for anything that could be coming your way and holding it up. Thanks. Yeah, you know, and these aren't that expensive either. You know, these are all windlass. As far as I know, they're all still available in stock. So yeah, you know, like this guy, you can get this guy for under $200. You know, the rapier goes around 300. But yeah, yeah, there's a lot of neat stuff on the sword market to check out and enjoy. You know, it's a little big and it's kind of cluttered up, but you know, maybe I can move the camera a little bit and just kind of show it. Yeah, see, there's a Viking style spear that I put together, as well as all my great swords. And then it kind of just goes around and you can kind of see the rest of my swords. There's a pole axe next to those rapiers, and then a few of my fantasy swords. So yeah. Hi, Emily. Hope you're enjoying your walk. Did I mess up the thing? Hopefully not. Move it down a little bit. Sorry, guys. I guess shouldn't have moved it, but anyway. But anyway, yeah. So yeah. So that's that. That's just a little kind of piece of the collection. Do I have Japanese swords? Yeah, they are in the living room area, though. This is kind of a extension of the dining area, and so I kind of in this back corner. I keep the hey John, how's it going? I keep the Japanese stuff over here. Now I do have one in reach that I'll show you, and I don't know, I guess we can back burner this because it's turned more into a Q&A and check out the collection, which is just fine. Yeah, I can always wrap the sword later, but this one's a really neat one, and I don't really talk about this one on the channel much because this one was a really big secret, and I guess I'm spilling the beans and letting the secret out, but I think disclaimers are gone because the deal fell through, and it basically but anyway, 2 years ago when I first started, I started Dynamo Sword Channel like good 6 years ago. It'll be 6 years in August. But one of my close friends in the sword community has always been Paul Southern, who is the administrator and owner operator of Sword Buyer's Guide. And one day Paul shot me an email, asked me if I'd be interested in being part of a new exclusive kind of program that they were trying to start in Japan. Paul lives in Japan, and anyway, he was talking to a few guys, and they were thinking about, because one of the big things with swords is oh, thanks, bud. By the sword, thanks. But anyway, so with these, so what it was is that, a lot of the production swords, as you guys probably know, anyone that's into production swords is, the most of them are made in like China or India because of, there's the labor costs and stuff. They're cheap to make, so it's easier to sell and mass produce. One of the big things about katanas, of course, or nihonto or Shinsakuto, as they're called, as far as a modern made blade, they're not cheap. And the reason why they're not cheap is because there's a lot of red tape and regulations and stuff to owning a Japanese sword or getting a Japanese sword, to your country if you're not in Japan. It's hard enough to buy a nihonto or a Shinsakuto in Japan. It's even that much harder to get one, overseas, especially in the United States. So basically what the idea was with Paul and Chris was they were going to get a lot of the, lower tier smiths or kind of, with Japanese culture, with swordsmanship, there's tiers of, apprenticeship and tiers of master. And, basically masters, I believe, if I remember right, just kind of at the top of my head, they go to level 4. So basically there is a lot of smiths that are in that level 2, level 3, level 1 category that technically can make swords, but they can't sell them. And there's some really odd laws with the Japanese regarding distributing swords. And thanks, bud. Glad you enjoyed the channel. They basically, there's a lot of regulations. They just can't make money. It would be like, for example, like if I did make swords, and let's say that, I could make, let's say 50 swords a year. But I'm only allowed to sell 2. And that's kind of how the Japanese market is. I don't stream daily. This is actually my first, technically my second stream. My first stream ever was with a fellow sword tuber, Matthew Jensen. This is my first one on my own. This is my first, self live stream. So hopefully you guys are all enjoying. It's crazy how fast time can go by on these. I mean, it's been 40 minutes. So yeah, having some fun, but, or I hope we are. But anyway, but yeah, back to this. So long story short, because I'm rambling. So basically Paul got a hold of me and said, hey, we're working out a deal to where we can cut the red tape and allow these lower level smiths that make still really great swords, you know, swords that are comparable to, you know, at least the mid-tier to high-tier katanas in the production market, and get people real Japanese swords. And I thought that was awesome because, you know, that's always been a stigma with sword, you know, especially with Japanese swords, you know, and Japanese production swords. They're not made in Japan. Now, that's kind of silly when you think about it, because we don't have that kind of, you know, attitude towards, you know, medieval swords. They can be made in China, India, whatever. We don't need, you know, an Italian arming sword like I was just wrapping the grip on to be made in Italy. But with, you know, the Japanese sword community, it's a little more traditional. It's a little more, you know, there's a little more ceremony to it, and that matters to the you know, especially the Japanese smith, to the Japanese you know, sword owner or Japanese sword art practitioner, to have a sword made in Japan. So that was the idea, was to get these swords out and get them worldwide and get these smiths jobs. And it was, you know, I thought it was great. I was like, yeah, let's do it. And it kind of fell through. You know, I don't really know the super insides, but pretty much how I got this sword is this was a prototype made sword that was supposed to simulate, you know, one of the, you know, semi sort of Japanese production line swords. Now, what they were going to do is, and you know, I can, and I would right now, but you know, then, you know, I don't want to have to re-roof my house at 10 o'clock at night. So I'm just, yeah, I'll take it out, but I'm not going to swing it too hard because I don't want it to cut anything in half. So we got to be real careful. But yeah, but no. But anyway, yeah. Long story short, so the deal kind of fell through, but I did get this prototype, and this. Yes, we're going to conserve the universe for one more day, or at least until the superheroes come to stop me and my world destroyer here. But anyway, but yeah, so it is, you know, folded. Now you notice it's a little, you might say, well, it's kind of scratchy looking. Well, it's what's known as a work polish. And what a work polish is it's basically meant for cutting. And that's what this sword was. And I did a private review of it. I did some cutting with it and kind of put it through its paces. And I mean, overall, it's a really nice sword. You know, the fittings themselves are actually, and some of you more seasoned sword enthusiasts, especially Japanese sword enthusiasts, might recognize that they are the, I believe the Boshin is the name, but the Boshin fittings, the Boshin Koshire and Suba, and from Tazando, and the Suka is also from Tazando, and the Sakamaki is, you know, the Hinerimaki, you know, or not Hinerimaki, the putting me on the spot being live, but anyway, the battle wrap, the Katate Make style. So anyway, and then the blade, I said, is the you know, folded Tamagahane, and it was made by a smith named Kanamase II, whose, you know, real name that I was going through when I was having emails and interactions with him was his name is Shinsuke, and you can find Shinsuke on YouTube. He's actually has a few videos where he makes swords, and I think what happened is that kind of Paul was cut out of the deal with Chris and Shinsuke, and then that means, of course, because I was tied into it through Paul, that when Paul was kind of moved on, I was moved on, and so I was supposed to get two prototypes. I was going to get this work polish blade just to kind of test out for them, And then I was supposed to get a more refined fitted, you know, real nice and tight, because this was a little loose. I had to do some work on it to make it really functional and fit, because it was kind of more just kind of shoved together, because the Tazando fittings didn't necessarily fit the you know, the blade that Shinsuke made. And so basically yeah, so it took a little you know, kind of work from me to kind of get fit properly. I needed to add a few extra SEPA and all that, and I needed to kind of fill the core a little bit, which I used a wood resin to kind of simulate, you know, and kind of fill and slat the Suka core. But yeah, overall, it's still a great sword, and it's, you know, it's a nice piece of history. It's kind of a cool one that, you know, I keep on the shelf and, you know, on its rack, and you know, and people ask, you know, it's like, are any of your Japanese swords real? And I was like, well, they're all real, because they're all functional, you know, dojo focused, you know, katana made from, you know, good production manufacturers. But yes, I do have a real one. I do have a made in Japan. Not a lot of people can say that. And of all stories to have, I got it for free. So, you know, I think, you know, the sword probably would value, you know, around, you know, maybe $3,000 or so. And yeah, got it for free. So you can't beat that. If anyone has some decent sword karma, you know, I guess I got it with this sword. I was really excited for the program. You know, I was really, and it wasn't even for like, ooh, I get a sword, and I was excited to be part of something that anyone that is detailed in the sword community knows. You know, Japan is very recluse when it comes to swords. And, you know, not that, you know, I don't have any, I have all the respect for the Chinese manufacturers and stuff when it comes to katana. You know, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have katana. You know, I wouldn't own, you know, the katanas I have. But at the same time, there's just something that, you know, my heart kind of bled for those Japanese smiths, because it's you know, you almost want to play, you know, a video in a Sarah McLachlan music tune, you know, kind of like the you know, the donation and the you know, the infomercials, because they literally are, you know, when you find out, you know, the problem is that you find out that they just, when you have a passion to make something as, you know, elegant as a katana, and not only just make a katana, but traditionally make a katana, and go through the years and years and years of study and work, and then you don't get to profit from it. You know, you still got to go have a 9 to 5 because, you know, you're not allowed to sell swords. That sucks. And that was my main focus on being part of it. But, and I know, yeah, by the sword, I know see, that's what the program shifted to, because that's what they were originally doing. And that's why I think that this, you know, make a you know, a Nihonto production line was a little different. Because I remember when Chris, because I don't want to murder his last name. I mean, I guess it matters, doesn't matter. I think his last name was Loeb or Loeb, started with an L. But Chris Loeb, when he was originally doing it, and he got in the works with Paul, it was for selling, you know, kind of second rate or third rate Nihonto. And then when it got involved into this, you know, as far as like the Shinsakuto side, and going again and getting you know, the lower tier masters, you know, an opportunity to sell their swords, you know, that was the thing. Because I think the red tape workaround is they were going to make the swords, and then they weren't going to sell them. Somehow they were going to get them over to the States, and then they were going to distribute them stateside, and then I believe, like, you know, basically the Smiths would get a commission off the American sales. Don't know, not super savvy on Japanese law, so I can't really say the fine deal, but that was kind of the gist I got in the emails I got. And, but I mean, worst case scenario, I got a really neat sword and a really great story. But yeah, aside from that, yeah, it's, it's a really nice, beautiful sword. Shinsuke was a real awesome guy. I really enjoyed chatting with him, getting to talk with or at least we never verbally talked, but it was, email correspondence. I was able to, yeah, and that was the thing, and that's why they were going to try to sell them over here in the States. So basically, they were going to be sold kind of like you would buy like a Hanwei or a Dragon King. It was just going to be, Japanese made, and and they were going to go for, depending on the smith, because you could buy tiers of smith, so like something from Shinsuke was going to cost like around $5,000, and technically this sword is, from what I was told by Chris and Paul, is that the blade itself is, is valued at 5,000. But, there was some imperfections to it. So that's why I've always kind of set it at a lower value, but I would still, I guess, consider it 5,000. But yeah, avoiding the paper. So basically, and that was the pro and con, because you didn't get it papered. So, and so you were kind of taking, their word for it that it was made in Japan. I mean, I'm still technically taking their word for it that this was made in Japan. I mean, I had all the email correspondence and stuff, but as far as I know, this sword could have been made in Pakistan for all I know. If it wasn't, I mean, it's signatured and everything, and I know it was made. I watched it get made. I was given live video and stuff like that, and which was really cool because I was part of the creation process. But anyway, real quick before it slides up, Elliot, what is your family ancestry heritage? I'm kind of, I guess I would say British. My primary family heritage: English, Welsh, Scottish, some German, Swedish. Kind of a little bit of everything. Irish, if it's an ish, and it's pale and blonde or redheaded, I got a piece of that in me, I believe. But yeah, but primarily, as far as I know, my mother's side is prominently English, Scottish, Irish, father's side English, German, and then also there's some Swedish on my mother's side as well through one of my grandparents. But yeah, primarily I would say British as far as my primary ancestry or heritage. I always joke because I read somewhere that people with Scottish heritage have a two-tone as far as, so blonde hair, reddish beard is basically your I read somewhere that that's basically a sign that you're Gaelic. So I've just always said, yeah, I got, I kind of show my Scottish in me because of the red beard, blonde hair. Back to buy the sword. Yeah, it makes sense that if you can only make. Yeah, and that was the thing, because they and that's the problem with when you look at when they smelt the tamagahane. That's kind of seasonal too. It's almost like it's funny. It's going to sound funny saying this, but it's almost like how when you look at the farming industry here in the United States, and it's weird to think of tamagahane or as a commodity, as like potatoes or something, but or corn or something. But yeah, it's but anyway, yeah. So it's so that was kind of the thing, because yeah, I mean, and a lot of the more, even though they're traditional, I mean, they still use modern tools. The videos I got of Shinsuke making this sword was he used a power hammer. Did it bother me? No, because whatever, I'm a modern man, and I use a drill when I don't always have to screwdriver everything just to just to feel traditional, you know, when I'm putting something together. Yeah, hell yeah, let's use a drill. And I'm the same thing with this, you know. I mean, tools are meant to be used, and if you live in you know the year 2026, then you should be able to use a, you know, thermometer and a power hammer, you know. You have a buster crop and have 2,000 pounds. All the stores want us to buy it because people are not going to all of a sudden return. Yeah, and that's the thing, you know. It's like it's all volume, and that's just kind of how swords are. You know, it's kind of like something that, yeah, you know, and it's just economics, and it's the same with, you know, kind of something that me and Matt kind of brought up is, you know, how many swords are being sold. And we kind of agreed to each other that obviously more swords are being sold than not, because these businesses are staying busy. It's not like, you know, these manufacturers are making swords and then just stuffing them in warehouses, and they have hundreds of swords and they're going broke selling 10 swords a week. You know, same like with the Albion argument, to where if they're so backed up, obviously they're selling swords, and they obviously are, because even if one does kind of show up live on the market, like on Cult of Athena or something, it's gone in less than a day. You know, I haven't checked Cult of Athena lately, but oh, for Albion, yeah, most everybody is. You know, I thought about buying an Albion once, and then I got kind of impatient, and I ended up buying, you know, 3 or 4 other swords. I was going to get a Gedalt arming sword, because I've always liked that, and like the Brazil nut pommel. You know, probably if I was going to get an Albion, probably my 2 on my list is definitely the my go-to Albion sword is a Discerner. I just love that sword, obviously, you know, with a mix of its actual history, and then also because of you know, with Excalibur, you know, the 80s King Arthur movie Excalibur, which used that sword as their Excalibur. But overall, yeah, I mean, I really love that sword, you know, $2,000, you know, whatever. And then also, you know, Brianna really wants the Albion Arn sword. And so if I was going to buy one, I'd probably end up buying the Arn, just to make us both happy, because we kind of get best of both worlds, since it uses the Gedalt blade, and then it has the, you know, the Arn hilt from the film. So anyway, waiting on a Viceroy. Awesome. Nice. You are into 20 A's, 22 or 20 A's. Nice. You know, and then a Mercenary, excellent, 15A. And then the Tauber. See, I want a Tauber too. I like the Tauber. I like that, you know, because it's very, you know, it's in my neck of the woods. It's the you know, that 12A, that war sword. I love war swords. You know, almost more so than long swords. I mean, I love all swords, but you know, the Tauber, and it's, you know, with that, you know, the B. What's the other one? The 12A. I was getting them confused. The Tauber's that's the Tauber. Is it the one with the scent stopper, or is it the one with the Type V pommel? I know they're both subtype 18B blades. The other one, the Exeter. That's what I was thinking of. I was thinking of the Exeter when you said Tauber, but yeah, nice. They are, yeah, the 2-year plus wait times are horrible. But then again, that's what makes, you know, being part of Sword Buyer's Guide and being part of the community and part of the classifieds, you know, so awesome, because you're able to, you know, you know, sometimes find those and get them now. You know, there was, you know, that was the, you know, I really wanted a Valiant Exeter, and I almost bought one this year, and then like somebody got it before I got it, and it was like, kind of damn, you know, because it was on the classifieds, but you know, but yeah. So anyway, yeah, I'm all for high-end swords. I just, as I kind of talked with Matt, I'd rather buy 5, you know, budget swords to play with for the price of you know, that one you know, high end sword. I mean, but yeah, I almost broke on the guy who was selling the purple Maximilian. Oh yeah, that was a nice one too. I like that one. I like the Maximilian in general. You know, one of the reasons, you know, with you know, with the Lowland Claymore, the Windlass Lowland Claymore I have, you know, I always looked at the oh, which one is it? Yeah, that would have put it back. You know, the way I look at it is that we, you know, if I added up all the money, you know, it's like I always joke, because, you know, having two daughters myself, I always joke with my friends that don't have kids, but they have a lot of nicer, cooler stuff, and you know, they're like, it's a trade-off. You know, it's like, would I have more high-end swords if I didn't have two daughters that, you know, one I'm just about to put through college and stuff? Yeah, but you know, it's a trade-off. Who wants the kids and who wants the stuff? And you know, I'm happy with the kids, so I'm happy with what I got. But definitely, you know, some of that expensive stuff, you look at it, you're swiping your card either way. If I looked at just what I pay just to feed those two a month, man, you know, I could probably have two Albion swords. But yeah. Yeah, it's, you know, that's what sucks. And housing, you know, unfortunately isn't any cheaper these days. Even here in Idaho, it can, you know, yeah, it's not fun. But anyway, but yeah. So yeah, my daughter. Speaking of my daughter, she just walked in. But anyway, yeah, I know it's. Oh, hey, what's up, BC Weapons International? Hey, thanks for stopping in and visiting on the live feed. But yeah, I know it's, yeah, housing. Yeah, if you know, I always make the running joke, because I'm, you know, I'm over the hill. I'm 40. That, you know, I might as well just go for it and buy a big fancy house, because, you know, what's going to happen? I ain't going to pay it off in 50 years, and I probably won't be alive. So yeah, let's just make payments till I die, I guess. But you know, whatever. But yeah, it is those, and it's just, I loved when Albion came out with the two-handed swords when they did, you know, and I think it was like, I don't know, like at least 10 years ago, if not longer. And you know, the big one that I liked was oh, what's its name? Starts with a T. But anyway, it basically looks like the Wallace Claymore, which ironically it's just a German Zweinhander, because the Wallace Claymore, actually, even though it's supposed to be the Wallace Claymore, the sword Mel Gibson used. I don't know if any of you guys knew this, a little fun movie trivia, but it was actually a German sword that they replicated that sword, and that's why it was kind of off base in the history of Braveheart, because it was like a 16th century sword, and they used it, you know, in the 13th century during Braveheart. But anyway, I need a room for my armory. Yeah, you know, and that's the thing. I mean, I got lucky with kind of this dining area, because, you know, having teenage girls, no one sits at the table anymore. We're definitely not trying to get at least one high-end piece. That would be cool. I mean, and you might as well, you know, I mean, if you got the funds and you got the time. But I said the wait times are killer. You know, you think about it, if you wanted one from each of them, let's say five, let's just say the five top guys. 1, 2, 3. No, the chieftain was the 13A. It was a Highland Claymore. It had the quarter foils, which was kind of weird, because it wasn't really an actual Claymore, because it wasn't a two-hander. If you look at the stats of the chieftain, it's actually just a war sword. It uses their still standard, their 13A blade. They just gave it the only one I don't have to order on is an A&A. A&A, I get what you mean, because A&A is one of those that, you know, I have a lot of respect for A&A with See, and that's the thing, and actually, Cult of Athena and getting some of those surprises, that is cool. Well, this is the thing. If you look at Chris and Keith, they have a style, I guess you could say, kind of like Del 10. And sometimes that style isn't, they like the historical accuracy side of it. And like I said, that was the difference, kind of like what me and Matt talked about, and I brought that up, and I know you were part of that. Weren't you? You were part of the Peter Johnson thing, weren't you, John? At least I think I would. I'll wait for you to answer before I finish my sentence, if you can. But anyway, but Arms and Armor, I mean, they have an aesthetic to them. Oh, you were, okay. So here's the thing. I don't know if you caught this in my chat with me and Matt, but the difference between an Albion and an ANA is an ANA is meant to be a one-to-one replica, kind of like the you've talked with Peter on the phone. Cool. Oh, not the interview. Oh, I thought you were in the video. Oh, maybe it was the Victa Unsheathed one of those. It was Vic Unsheathed was with Matt when they did the Peter Johnson talk. So apologize. I thought you were involved in that one. But anyway, with that's John from USR. So USR, that's is he not am I just maybe I need to watch it again. Maybe I'm getting confused on who was in it. But anyway, what Peter was saying is, and what kind of the point was is, next gens are not, they are what they are. They're okay. Unsheathed Sword, USR Unsheathed Sword, yeah, blonde showing. But anyway, next gens are that. They're next gen. They're performance based. And Peter basically said that in the interview. He's like, which is funny because that's what I find hypocritical, because Peter and Albion use the Oakeshott typology to sell their swords. 13A, Type V pommel, this and that, it's how they sell and describe their swords. But they will go but then Peter kind of had Oakeshott didn't really have it all figured out like he thought he did. He didn't really dog Oakeshott. He just said that his typology was inferior because he's basically saying, well, my sword dynamics is superior, and it is from a smith's perspective. And Oakeshott never claimed to look at swords from a smith's perspective. He did, but he did it later, and you see that in Records of the Medieval Sword. And he has a whole appendix for smithing a sword. And I was able to. Okay, all right, that's what it was then. Okay, but back to like Peter. So Peter basically, he says, well, I take a sword and I make it better because I know how to make it better. And he does. He's an excellent smith. He's a masterclass, second to none sword designer. And that's where he is. Peter is very sought after. He's a very intelligent. He knows his stuff. Nobody's discrediting Peter, but you have to look at it like anyone that's looking for a one-to-one historical replica of a said sword. It's kind of like the Slosh Urbach that you just reviewed. Was an improved, but only because of what was before. And that's how it is. I had the same argument, and this is where I've kind of backed off on my stricter plagiarizing argument, is because number one, you got to look at them all. I don't care if it's Peter or Swordier or Albion, ANA. Yes, there's a lot of, camaraderie in the community, but at the same time, they're all out to sell swords. I mean, that's the goal. The goal is to make money, sell swords. As I said with Matt, if you're good at something, you don't do it for free. And I cannot dock Peter for selling swords. And yes, in the plagiarizing argument, being insulted when, you know, another manufacturer or anything basically utilizes, you know, his designs or his statistics to make a sword, and then, oh well, we can mass produce it for $300, so you know, middle finger. You know, I don't think that's cool, and I still don't. But what Peter needs to understand is you know, and there's a reason why they're the best, and I'll get to that too. The thing with Peter is that yeah, and that's what I mean. That's exactly what I mean. Nobody owns this because nobody does. It's all, you know, it is. It's all, and everything's based on the typology, and that's why I said it was kind of BS that Peter kind of put it that way, because you sell your swords based on Oakeshott's typology. That already goes to show you're not using the Johnson typology. You're not changing it up and saying, well, I don't consider numbers, I consider letters. So the Johnson A1 is technically an Oakeshott type 10. He doesn't do that. And there's a reason why, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Oakeshott set such a set standard, just like Jan Peterson before him with the Viking swords, that, you know, it's easier to build off that rather than to try to recreate it. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. The wheel works. But back to because I'm rambling on and I apologize. What Peter basically said is that, you know, with the refinement of the next gens, what makes them so much better is because he utilizes stats. Now, with the plagiarizing side, again, yeah, what Peter doesn't understand is that 20, 30 years ago, if you talk to anyone about a sword and how it was made, they didn't know. Peter has to understand that for all of his, I want to keep it in my safe and keep it locked up for everyone to, you know, you have to, you know, that's almost like kind of like the Japanese smiths and how they were traditionally, to where if you weren't their apprentice, you didn't know their techniques. But the problem is that, especially back then, you know, or even with even on the European side with the Ulfbert swords, if the raiders come in and hack your head off and steal all the steel that you've made, nobody knows how you made that steel. How did you get such a nice sword? Well, it doesn't matter now. Ulfbert's dead. You know, Masahiro is dead. You know, the Bison Smith, whatever in Japan, was dead. You know, so now that legacy isn't there. And Peter has created a legacy because we can all look at it. I know I know I owe a lot of my knowledge and credit to Peter, and a lot of the gentlemen over at like My Armory and the articles and features that they put. A lot of the guys from Sword Buyer's Guide. You know, I can name the guy that got me into the Oakeshott typology on Sword Buyer's Guide. It was Shooter Mike. He's a moderator, I believe, still, and he's been on there for years. And one day I was looking at one of my swords. It's way in the back, so I won't be able to dig it out. But it is my Windlass effigy sword. First European sword, functional European sword I ever bought. And I bought it in 2010. And it was on Last Chance on Museum Replicas. It's a really nice, beautiful sword. I reviewed it. Look up effigy sword on Sword Buyer's Guide, and you'll see the re-review. Yeah, it's just honestly, you know, somebody asked me what my favorite sword is. Be all end all, even though I got a lot of great new swords, you know, that effigy sword is always going to be the one that, you know, it's if there was a bury me with its sword, it would be the effigy sword. But I can't get it buried with me because actually my eldest daughter loves it and she wants it if I do ever pass. I know that's a little morbid, but we've talked about it. It's kind of funny because she really loves that sword. Maybe just because it's always been around and she grew up with it and she loves it just as much as me. But anyway, but back to kind of the point I'm talking about with that effigy sword, you know, I was looking at it and I was like, hey, you guys always talk about typologies and this and that. You know, it's kind of boils down to you know, I was like, hey, and then Shooter came up. He's like, well, in the Oakeshott typology, it's kind of hard to say because it kind of looks like a 15, but it could be an 18. It's probably a 16, and this and that. And I was like, wow, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, look it up. It'd be easier if you studied it rather than me try to explain it to you on a forum in a thread. So that's what got me studying and reading Oakeshott was Shooter Mike and giving me a suggestion on what type my Oakeshott or what Oakeshott type my effigy sword was. Now the effigy sword is based off of a real sword, and you'll see that in the review if you watch the review. It was there's an effigy in Sussex. I can't remember the specific name of the cathedral or the it's not a cathedral. It's not that big. It's you know, just basically a church. Sorry, forgetting correct terminology, but he. Anyway, do I have the Windlass Schlosser? But I do not. That's one of the few windlasses I don't have, and I should have it. I just never got around to getting it because I have an Arbedo. And what is the proper sword to use to kill a dragon? Well, are we going full nerd, or are we asking, you know, a you know, kind of a hypothetical question? If we're going full nerd, I mean, you know, obviously something magical that can pierce its skin. As BC Weapons just said, a large sword like the Albion Maximilian or something, you know, by the sword, a dragon slayer, obviously. So yeah, you know, swords weren't meant for dragons, you know. Spears are meant for dragons. Big giant crossbows, like on you know, ballistics, like yeah, that's true. The St. George painting is a type 17. And you know, that's what I was getting on with this with the effigy of Roger Elmbridge, because you see a very clear silhouette of a sword on his effigy, and it has a really nice type V pommel or type T pommel. It's hard to tell. Windlass kind of went with kind of like a type V with it, and then you have you know, a nice, easily discerned style 4 guard. But then you have this blade in a scabbard, and it's broad and tapers down. Honestly, if I was looking at it, I'd, you know, because it looks like an arming sword, I'd call it a type 15. You know, and that's what I consider the effigy sword. But then the Windlass effigy sword has this a thin fuller running down about a quarter of the blade's length, and I think that's why. You know, I mean, technically that would the fuller, because most 15s aren't fuller. There are a few traditional type 15s and 15As that do have fullering. But it's very few and far between. You know, like one of them is like the Shrewsbury sword. You know, that you know, it cruciform. You know, it's the one with the style 5 guard with the crucifixes indented in. Windlass has made a replica of it. I just did a sword news and I showed it off for Topeka. They just did another version of it. But anyway, yeah, the Shrewsbury sword. It's in the it's in the 15s and in Records of the Medieval Sword, if you guys have that to check out. But yeah, it's like, okay, so, but then the blade, you could tell. What sword would you want if you had to fight a bear? Again, we're looking at bears are dense. And could you kill a bear with a sword? Well, yeah, you can kill a bear with a spear. And what's a spear? It's a stick with a blade about that big, or, you know, that big, whatever. Bears can be killed by being pierced with spears. Obviously, you want the distance, the length of the spear. I guess if you were really going to go after a bear with a spear, you would want something thrust appropriate, but you would want it lengthy. So he said type 17. So yeah, a nice thick type 17 with a really long blade. Definitely, why not? But you know, The thing is, and this is what the reality, especially if you've ever hunted or anything, I'm in Idaho, I've hunted. Things just don't die, especially things that don't want to die or don't appreciate you trying to kill them, or in the sense of something that wants to kill you. And, so you're defending yourself like an attacking bear or something, it stabbing it and cutting it. Oh, it's dead. It's not the movies. And a wild animal, I've been around some wild animals like that, like bears and cougars and things. And they're just, until you just don't know. And it's easy to say, oh, well, I just take my sword out and, and get it. Nah, not really. I mean, it's a whole different environment, and the stress and the anxiety and things like that. It's easy to superficial it on paper, and I don't want to sound like a snob or a know-it-all, but yeah, you would. Yeah, well, thanks, Tim. Yeah, obviously you get it. So long story short, blah. But yeah, that's the thing. But there was hunting swords. If you look them up, hunting swords were real. And they were used usually pretty much to finish off an animal. And they had a unique shape. They were almost spear-like, because they'd have a really thin blade, and then they'd have a very large, wedged, almost spade-like tip. And it was basically just to finish off whatever animal that you shot with a bow and arrow or crossbow or musket, at the time, because there were firearms at the time. What is the nicest tier piece you own? Tim, just I'll get to BC real quick and show them what some of my more high-end favorites. But when it comes to that, yeah, that's just the tenacity of man versus nature. And if you have, that fighting spirit and just that I'm not going to die, yeah, you can get through a lot of stuff. Sometimes you can outbear the bear by just being tenacious enough to where the bear's like, oh my God, maybe I shouldn't have screwed around with this guy. And sometimes it's usually the other way around, where man learns that he shouldn't have messed around with nature. But still, yeah, there's always those stories where, sometimes, it can. But as far as, what is the nicest tier piece you own? Well, I kind of spilled the beans. I don't know if you saw it, but you missed it. But it was my custom Shinsakuto. I mean, $3,000 to $5,000 katana made in Sekigifu, Japan, by a second level credited master smith. Definitely, that's my highest tier. Now, as far as production value, probably one of my Royal Armory swords, he's over here, and I don't want to move the camera again and screw it all up, but my 15th century two-handed sword, I think it goes for like $800 new. But I have almost all the Royal Armory swords. Like I said, I got the 15th century longsword here, the Type 17 that By the Sword was just talking about. All right, By the Sword, yeah. Thanks for hanging out. I'll probably be cutting it here soon anyway. We'll probably make it an hour and a half. I'm not going to try to beat me and Matt's 3-hour record. But By the Sword, I appreciate you, bud. Yeah, Type 17. So yeah, this is that Royal Armories 10s Type 17. Real beautiful sword, really nice handling, nice. And this is what I was saying. I don't know if you're still on, John, but before you go, yeah, I am katanas and euros. Honestly, that's where I got my start. I'll show John, By the Sword of this real quick. But you see that? That's a ricasso. Doesn't look like a ricasso, but that's a ricasso. It is blunt, but honestly, buy it from Cultifathina. They'll sharpen it. Windlass won't sharpen it, and mine's not sharpened. Some of my Royal Armory swords are sharpened because I got them secondhand on Sword Buyer's Guide. Cultifathina will sharpen these. So if you want, to, but honestly, their geometry is so thin. You could use one of the fine grits on your workshop and sharpen it yourself. If you can hone that that 20A you had from Sword Ear, you can hone one of these. The edge is that thin. It's almost enough to cut. You know, it's still dull, but yeah, it's thin enough. It's not like the traditional windlass 1mm. Yeah, who does want to sharpen? I know I'm probably gonna beat you to it, because me and my brother Brian are gonna go fiddle around this weekend, and I'm gonna get my work sharp. And I think I'll do a tutorial video, because you know, just for fun. Yeah, if I don't need to reprofile an edge, it's easy. Yeah, that would take like 20 minutes on my work sharp to get an edge on that. Yeah, so it wouldn't take forever. But then again, like I said, I put edges on, you know, windlass swords, like this one, which I actually just did a follow-up review on. So spoilers, this one's going to be on the channel soon, cutting. But this is my Munich Town Guard. And this was dull when I bought it, and I sharpened it with the work sharp, and it was like traditional old windlass, because this is an old original Munich Town Guard. So this was probably made in the early 2010s, and you know, bought it from Dave Kelly, who was a you know, really great part of the sword community, who passed away a while ago. And I got this and the parrying dagger from him back in the day. I share a nice story with it on the follow-up, so you guys will have to listen to that. But anyway, when that releases, probably next week. But anyway, yeah, so you can, with the work sharps, you could sharpen them. But anyway, back to, yeah, I'll do it. I plan on doing one, you know, for sure. Thanks. And then here, I never played with this. Let's see. Oh yeah, I can. Cool. Sorry guys, I'm gonna get back to that original question. Oh yeah, the katana thing. That's what we were talking about. Yeah, so I want to show him the 17, and now I think John's went to bed. Yeah, definitely do. And they're still back in stock. You know, when I originally bought that from Dave, they had been discontinued. They weren't making them, and then they brought them back. Yeah, okay. All right, bud. Have a good night. Thanks for hanging out. It was fun having you on. Definitely. All right. But back to the katanas. Yeah, I'm a katana guy initially. It's weird. Kind of my backstory with swords is, and I kind of mentioned in the live stream with Matt is, you know, I was an 80s kid. Everything had swords in the 80s. Willow, He-Man, ninjas, you know, Ninja Turtles, G.I. Joe, Storm Shadow, Snake Eyes, Lion-O, Thundercats. You know, if it was cool and it was from the 1980s, it had a sword in it. And always been a sword guy, and that primarily stemmed from He-Man, because I've always been a big He-Man guy. He-Man was my guy, you know, growing up. And with that, you know, and that kind of evolved into, you know, I had some really cool neighbor friends, the Howards. I don't know if they're watching. If they are, hey, Stephen, Chris, Ryan, yeah, hopefully you are, and you're like, hey, David's got a YouTube channel or something. But anyway, yeah, I grew up with these guys. We had a lot of fun. You know, the ninjas and Ninja Turtles and action figures and Three Ninjas movie. You know, I remember going and watching that in the theaters with them. It's just, you know, it's just a lot of fun. And that's what kind of got me into martial arts. And martial arts, you know, judo, karate, you know, the basics, you know, growing up as a kid. And then I got really into Bruce Lee kind of in my teenage years, and studying, you know, kind of more martial philosophy and stuff, and mixed martial arts from that Bruce Lee mentality. And then that got me into actual mixed martial arts, because right around that time was when UFC started getting really big. And I remember there was a video rental place that had all these old UFC fights, you know, the old originals like Ken Shamrock and Royce Gracie. And I started watching those, and it just, you know, with a mix of all that, just my teenage years were really martial arts centered, you know, learning different martial arts. And then that kind of bumped up once I hit 18, you know, 17, 18, back into swords. Okay, nice. Yeah, see, and that was how we, kind of long story short, what my first functional katana for like dojo practice and doing, actual cutting and kata and aido and bato was a Hanwei practical katana. The standard practical katana, the old original practical katana that was like the glued on suka and the suede ito and the the plastic samagawa, and I ended up buying it for like $400 back in 2003 in here at a local sword shop at the Boise, the Boise Town Square Mall. They used to have a shop called Marto. See, that's a good movie too. And I don't know if anyone's watching my Arn the Knight Templar sword review. It ain't got crap for views, but I plan on doing a Robin Hood Prince of Thieves. It's in the tier of David recommends as far as sword reviews. So yeah, in sword reviews, I like to talk about the movie, and then I'll also talk about the swords in the movie. So I'll be talking about the Robin Hood, the Locksley sword, as I like to call it. But anyway, back to what we're talking about. So I bought that sword, Hanwei, and I remember I wanted the Ninjato, the practical Ninjato, but it sold before I could get it because I'd been saving up for it because it was like $350. So I ate it and I bought the katana, and I had that for a lot of years. And then after a lot of practice and use, the suede ito began to when's the next stream? I don't know. I've been so focused on just video reviews. Sword news is a big one because I'm doing that every week, and I'm collaborating with a few of the vendors. I don't want to spill too many beans before they're cooked, but yeah, sword news is definitely getting bigger. It's definitely getting more attention, and there's going to be a lot more involvement from vendors and things in the future. So, which is going to be better for them, and it's going to be better for you guys because you guys are going to get to see some really cool stuff, I think. So sword news is pretty much taking up a bulk of my week schedule as far as sword or YouTubing, because I still have a full-time job. I still have a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. So primarily I work on videos, in the evening or on the weekend. But yeah, I'll whenever anybody wants me to do one. I know I haven't had like a large view count on here, but for those of you that have been sticking around, yeah, definitely. I got a cool one about that Robin Hood Prince of Thieves. Back when that movie came out, I was a kid. I think, hell, it was 91. So I was like in first, second grade. And I remember for my birthday, one of the coolest presents I ever had, and you guys will probably eBay it and find it because they were cool, and I lost them. And I still don't know what the hell happened to those. But my dad brought home, me being the sword kid, the surprise birthday present. It was Robin Hood branded plastic sword and dagger, and they were cool. They were like, because they looked traditional medieval. They weren't like your usual plastic toy sword that looks like a fantasy, something from a D&D manual or a Adventure Time cartoon or something. It was like a real looking sword. It looked like a traditional, cruciform hilt. It had like the straight guard, the wheel pommel, and the blade with a fuller. But yeah, I remember I got that for my birthday, and I played with it all over the place. And then somehow I lost them. I left them lying around somewhere up on my grandpa's property, and it just, I don't know. They just disappeared. The ground ate them, I guess. But anyway, but yeah, so I would like, let me start more friends or what Hazim sword. So you like like the big, kind of over curved scimitar. Okay. Yeah, that was a pretty cool sword. And it's still pretty cool when he when he throws it into the witch and kills her at the end. But yeah, pretty cool. Oh, spoiler, sorry, but if nobody, I'm sure everybody's watched it, but if they haven't, all right, I won't tell anymore. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves spoilers. But yeah, but anyway, yeah, no, yeah, cool character. And which on the live stream with Matt, I was talking about the BBC Robin Hood from the 80s, the TV series. And that actually that also had he was a little different because he actually had two scimitars he'd pull off his back, but yeah, they had the same character in that, and he was pretty cool because he started out as a bad guy that was like brainwashed by the main bad guy, and then he ended up fighting Robin Hood and snapped out of his brainwashing and became Robin Hood's friend. That's how that BBC show is. But anyway, but yeah, I don't know. How many Royal Armory swords do I have? I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6. So I have 6 out of the 9. The only ones I don't have is I don't have the Toto, the 14th century arming sword or single-handed sword. I don't have the 2 single-edged swords. I think that's it. I think those are the only 3 I don't have. Yeah, but there's a really cool one. I did that on Sword News. Go check out episode 1 or it's episode 1 or episode 2 of Sword News on my channel. And over at Sword Buyer's Guide store, they have Swordier has made a functional Connor katana, and it's really cool if you want to check that out. Yeah, so definitely, I don't know if you typed that before I said that, but yeah, if you wanted some details, go check out Sword News and later. But if you want to, Sword Buyer's Guide store or Swordier does have a functional Connor katana, like the original movie sword. But yeah, all right. But anyway, yeah, so I got 6, and then yeah, so I almost have them all, and I mean, I wouldn't be against getting the single edged ones like the falchion and the single edged arming sword. They're not my kind of cup of tea. I don't know. Like kind of like when I was talking with Matt, I'm kind of more, kind of long sword, arming sword lean as far as like my European sword styles. Like the Oakeshott typology. I love the standard cruciform double-edged sword. Now since, obviously if I'm buying it out of my own pocket, then I'm going to buy what I want. I was going to buy the 14th century arming sword. Oh, absolutely. Well, yes and no. I mean, you can kind of look. And here I'll grab the shorter ones just for comparison. I'll put this guy up because he's so long. He's kind of hard to get in the shot anyway. But I'll kind of give you a kind of side-by-side comparison of a few different windlasses. So we got an old original windlass from like the early 2000s. We got a Royal Armories. Here, you know what? I'll just get him out because he's still not a bad sword. And this just goes to show that not all old swords from windlass were bad. Here's that effigy sword I was talking about earlier. So we'll take the effigy sword, and then we'll take the new, seneschal that I just reviewed. So when we look at them all, we'll just kind of go down a windlass timeline, I guess, real quick. Maybe I'll do a full video on that, We'll have a little fun, call it the windlass timeline. And since I have so many different eras of windlass swords. But anyway, so yeah, so our first era is Dana White do a viewing of his collection. Is he a sword collector? I didn't know Dana White was a sword collector. If he is, yeah, that'd be pretty cool. And if I remember right, Dana just lives in Vegas, so he's not too far from me. He's just south of me. So that'd be kind of pretty cool if I could get in touch with Dana White and he wanted to give me the time of day to go check out his sword collection and talk swords. That'd be actually pretty cool. But anyway, back to this. So this is kind of more your 2000s Windlass. Leather scabbard. They all normally have this little ball at the collar to kind of help with belt frogs and stuff, you know, to carry in a, you know, carry it around in a Ren fair or something like that. And they're not bad. You know, this is another one of those that, you know, they always say there was bad windlass swords and then there was a few diamonds in the rough. And this is definitely one of the diamonds in the rough. Hypothetically speaking, for the chance to win $1 billion, would you be able to survive a full year being hunted by Prime, Mike Tyson, and O.J. Simpson trying to hunt you with replica swords? So they have replica swords and I'm empty-handed, or I get a sword and then I got to fight them off? Because, I mean, it's kind of, you know, force multipliers, I guess you could say. If I have a sword in my hand, so we both have swords. Well, I'm just going to fuel my 2-hour live stream ego and say that I believe that I could beat both Mike Tyson and O.J. Simpson in a sword fight. Just because. You asked the question hypothetically, I'm going to hypothetically say I could beat them in a sword fight. Not saying I could or I couldn't, just hypothetically. But anyway, what is the blue scabbard and handle sword with the fishtail pommel? All right. Yeah, I can get to that next. So I won't forget that. I love how swords make anything possible. They do. That's why they've been used for thousands of years, because you put a sword in your hand and some moderate skill in how to use it. And again, force multipliers. It changes the perspective. Just kind of like, you know, why did swords go out of favor? Well, because kapow, you know, I can shoot you from 100 paces rather than chase up to you and stab you with a sword. You know, it's just the you know, force multipliers always matter. You know, you could have 10 of the greatest swordsmen in the world. You know, you could have the Three Musketeers and Mad Mardigan and Aragorn and He-Man and Conan the Barbarian and all them piled up, ready to kick ass and take names. And then you can light a cannon and end their day. And that's the way it goes. It's the way of the world. But anyway, but yeah, so this, I mean, you look at this one. This one's honestly a really nice sword. So this one's based off of the Oakeshott Type 13 in the Records of the Medieval Sword, known as 13-1. And it's got a really nice inverted type eye pommel, which has it's round, it's chamfered like an eye, but it has the indentation on the inside. So it's not a J1 or a J. It's an eye, inverted eye, even though he doesn't have a subtype for it. You know, he just has the polygonal, you know, I1. But I mean, technically, I guess you could consider this like an I2, but they were pretty rare, so he didn't really classify them. And then it's got a really nice style. It's almost a style 11, and I used it in my Oakeshott video. I used it as a representation of a style 11. Style 11s are really hard to find on the market, and it's where they really thin and then they flare out. But this is pretty much, yeah, definitely like a little, yeah, and that's what they were for, is to put a little trinket or stone or coin, you know, to give individuality to the sword, you know, because swords mattered to, you know, to a knight in his time. But then it also it matches the type pretty decently with the 3 fullers and the 3 fin throwers. And then it's not lanicular, it's hexagonal, as you might be able to see. I can see it from my end, so you guys could probably see it, but it's hexagonal, but it's not diamond. And that kind of says something about a early windlass sword. Well, shouldn't it be? And then of course it is properly peened. Now the grip's different. I did the grip myself. The grip was your typical bulky black pleather windlass grip. So I shaped it down and made it more ergonomical and put a decent little blackish gray wrap on it with a decent seam. But yeah, I just added a coin to one of mine. Yeah, definitely. There's nothing wrong with that. And I've never really done that with any of my swords, but I did buy a a sword secondhand, a Windlass Type 14 that did have Templar coins added to the pommel. So, you know, it's just something I just, you know, there was a guide for a while on Sword Buyer's Guide Forum that was selling those coins and stuff for people to buy. And it was really cool when he was. And then by the time I got around to maybe thinking of buying one where it actually had like a J1 that had an indentation, I ended up not, you know, he ended up quit selling them. So, but anyway, so yeah, that's your kind of timeline. So this is kind of what you were looking at from Windlass. Not a lot of distal taper in the 2000s to 2010 era. You know, this is kind of like the earliest, so like mid 2000s. And then we'll move on to the effigy. And the effigy isn't really much different, honestly, because, you know, it was still around in the late 2000s, 2010s. Like I said, I bought this in 2010, and it was last chance, discontinued. So you can still find this on the windlass.com website. They call it like the 1438 sword, I believe. It's not called the effigy sword anymore, but it is based off the effigy sword, you know, that's on the effigy of Sir Roger Emblem, who was the Sheriff of Sussex in the early 1400s. But anyway, it's a really nice sword, and like I said, it's a unique blade type because you look at it and see how thin and how tapering it is. I mean, it's a type 15. But for this sword, well, this sword is just your standard long arming sword, so it would work, you know, with your eye, you know, like with your standard, you know, buckler or shield and arming. But yeah, but anyway, yeah, I mean, it's, yeah, you could, like any arming sword formation would work with this, you know, Tomahawk or anything. So, but anyway, yeah, with this one, you know, going back to it, but yeah, it's really nice. Again, peened. A lot of people say, oh, well, all the Windlass swords are threaded. And most Windlass swords weren't threaded. Most of the ones that are threaded were the intricate hilt ones, and they had a screw-on pommel. But the thing is that all windlasses are full tang. So even if you, you know, took the pommel off on one of the screw ones, it's still a solid tang, because what they do is they thread. The bottom looks like a He-Man style, looks like a He-Man cartoon style of sword. Kind of, sort of. Yeah, kind of, sort of, because it's got that. But it's actually a variant of the Type V1, you know, with its kind of with its ridges. It's almost a T4, but see how flat it is, and you see kind of its, when you see its body, you definitely see that it's a V1. But anyway, yeah, so this one was really nice, and like I said, I've had this sword for years. I've cut with this sword, and I've done so much to this sword. I mean, this was like my, you know, oh, I want to go out and whack something really hard with it and see if it can handle it, you know, destructive testing and all that. I mean, this sword's been through it all, and I've had it for over 10 years. You know, I bought it in 2010, so it's 16 years. I've had it for 16 years. This is my first original European sword, and but yeah, it's pretty cool. And you know, this was your average 2010s era Windlass sword. Mirror polish, decent historical look, not a lot of distal taper, but there is some. I hate it when people say the Windlass swords don't have distal taper. They do. Is it as prominent as other swords? No. But the natural progression of profile taper forces the forging to create distal taper. That's just how it is. That's just how swords are. It's kind of like with anything that you kind of flatten out and plane out, just like you do when you forge a sword. It definitely, you know, it's going to thin out towards the tip. It's just the function of it, and just how it works. That's how some of the Depika ones are always really weird, because you'll see how they kind of thin out in the midsection and then they thicken out at the tip. I don't know why Depikas do that. Maybe it's for more reinforcement for stage combat and thrusting, but overall, yeah. And, you know, overall for, you know, Windlass leather sheath scabbard, you know, this one holds, you know, pretty well, and has for years. And then you move on, and then you get to, and most Windlasses are how much you spend on swords altogether. Honest, because I did, and only because all my sword actors, I do want that seneschal. I love the pommel. Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna need some Gallagher action. I don't have any watermelons, or I would cut some. All the watermelon is pre-cut because my girls like those little deli, or not deli, but produce packs where they dice up the watermelon in little squares. So I could do like a fake cut and chop, 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 and then drop a bunch of diced watermelon and really show how cool I am. But yeah, so most everything up until recently, like the 2020s, like when the Royal Armory started kind of getting developed, this was your average windlass sword, is what you see with like the effigy. So decent design, nice for the price, can't complain, not amazing, but not bad. Great heat treatment, you know. They definitely got like their the tapering down better in the 2010s and up, to where they weren't either solid and thick with the shorter swords, or whippy like with the long swords. And then you got the Royal Armories, which completely is a night and day sword. A Royal Armory sword technically isn't a windlass sword because it's in the level of high-end swords. A lot of people argue that, so, oh, they're not that good. But honestly, they are. And the fit and finish and everything put together, in the design to it, it being a one-to-one replica. And this goes back to the Arms and Armor. I don't know, that was a conversation long lost, and I apologize for that. We rambled off. But Arms and Armor swords are basically focused on one-to-one replication. Keith and Chris run the Oakeshott Institute, and they focus on Oakeshott typology and one-to-one historical accuracy. The Royal Armories is focused on making a nice sword, but not a nice sword to use, but a nice sword because the original was a nice sword. And this original that was probably used in the War of the Roses, 15th century, late 15th century, is that type of sword. This sword, when you look at the original in Records of the Medieval Sword or on the Royal Armory's website, it is a noble sword. And it's very smooth. And there's not, the hammer marks aren't there. Windlass took their time and put a lot of effort into this sword. And ironically, this is a $500 sword. And it has the level of fit and finish as like a Valiant Armory. A lot of people might argue that, but I've handled Valiant Armory swords. And this is it is in that tier range. I could see this, they could charge $800 for this and it would sell. But they sell it for $500 because they're windlass and they like to be the budget guy. I've talked to Mr. Windlass myself, and he said, we like to be the budget guys. Is that a coffin sword? No, this one is just more of your standard arming sword. 15th century. The family, it's a family F. And the family F is, by hilt family, is this style 9 curved guard, and normally a wheel type, or specifically type J or J1 pommel. And it was a really popular hilt configuration, especially in England. You saw a lot of arming swords, especially type 18 swords with this. There's like 3 or 4 in Records of the Medieval Sword with this hilt. The most renowned one is the one that gets called the Henry V sword. But that's kind of disingenuous because of the historical background to it. It's not really a Henry V sword. And that's the truth too. And I'll tell you the secret of that, because that's another tangent that we got off. And before I get on another tangent, because man, I can just talk everybody's ear off, I will show this sword off to the gentleman that asked earlier. And what this is a custom sword made by Jesse Bleski. Now, this sword normally retails for around $1,000 to $1,200. I got it secondhand, and it went through quite an ordeal from Canada. And if the friend from some Sword Buyers Guide forum that sold it to me is on watching, then yeah, thank you again for being patient when working with it. I mean, we both worked to get this sword to me because United States Postal Service just wanted to basically F off and lose it. I don't understand how a one-handed sword is better in battle. Well, it depends on your battle. It depends on who you're fighting, how you're fighting. If you have a shield and an arming sword, especially in a earlier period or in a later period, you have kind of an advantage because you have the shield, you have the protection, and then you have the sword that does its job behind its shield because you can use it two-handed. But anyway, real quick, I'll get this out of the way. So this is the Jesse Blesky, and it's a custom sword. It's not a custom-made sword. It's a custom-fitted sword because what Jesse Blesky does is he takes printed armory fittings, which he is now the proprietor of. He took over from I think Mike Jaw originally did the printed armories and he kind of first introduced them on Sword Buyer's Guide Forum. But anyway, but yeah, so this is the Viscount fittings on and that's why I kind of call it the Jesse Blesky Viscount. So the Viscount fittings are kind of this style 10 guard and type V pommel. And then he uses Hanwei Tinker blades because you can get, or you could get the Hanwei Tinker blades, to where you could just buy the blade. So he has like the war swords, everything that had a hex nut, as you can see here, because this one's also fitted with a hex nut, just like any other Hanwei Tinker. Like I have the Hanwei Tinker Great Sword of War back here, and it's got the same hex nut, or a Hanwei Tinker Bastard, or the standard Hanwei Tinker Longsword. They all have the hexagon internal nut, and so basically he just makes those. So he makes the grips, does the printed armory fitterings, and then normally does some type of Hanwei Tinker blade. But anyway, so yeah, so that's that. So that's the Jesse Blesky. So hopefully, hopefully, you like it and you enjoy it. But yeah, back to what BC said about, it is crazy because again, you look at a sword, for example. I got one right here. Well, this is a Balor Arms, and this is the second gen Balor Arms made by Windlass, a Teutonic sword. But still, I mean, you look at that sword. I bought that sword for $250. Lanicular cross section, proper termination on the fullerene, proper grip, proper fitted ting slot, nicely peened, nicely shaped, extremely well balanced, proper distal tapering for the type, because not all swords need or had distal tapering. Not all historical swords had distal tapering. I always like to get that out of the way because I know distal tapering, this and that, is always a big argument in the sword community. And you know what? That's another Peter Johnson thing. And yeah, more power to Peter Johnson. His next gens are high performance swords, beautiful swords, but they're not a one-to-one replica. And he stated that. I tried to get that point out clearly. He states, don't look at a next generation sword like a one-to-one replica. Like don't look at the Kingslayer as a replica of this 18 number 3 in the Records of the Medieval Sword or in the Royal Armories. The Kingmaker is inspired by this sword. It's not this sword. It has completely different dynamics in this sword because Peter refined it, at least to his statistics. Some people might like that. Some people don't. Not everybody loves an Albion. Not everybody does. And that's what is, kind of funny with it. But anyway, I didn't really mean to grab that one. Anyway, I meant to grab this one. I just wasn't paying attention. But yeah, this is the Sword Ear. I just did a cutting review and follow up on this guy. It still has that sad little chip in it because I haven't finished that off. But yeah, I don't know if you can see it. You can probably see a minor little clink in the reflection. But yeah, you can see that chip in it. Still a nice sword, but then again, that's the difference. And this is something where you said, it's like I'm seeing level of finishes on $250 swords that they shouldn't be. And that's exactly it. Because, I mean, look at this sword, $250. And look at that fit and finish on the pommel and everything. I mean, the grip, I got to take credit for the grip. That's what that grip that we started the live feed on will look like eventually when I get around to it, But yeah, I mean, this is a great sword for $250. All these Sword Ear swords and Romance of Men and Azure, they're great swords, and who wouldn't want one? They're awesome, but yeah, it's like, but there is still some flaws in it because again, the attention to details in mass production and budget kind of hold them back a little bit. There's always going to be a caveat, usually on a cheaper sword, you know, and it's not that it's too good to be true. It's just that kind of like with me, like with the chipping, and it's just what's it gonna, you know, what's it gonna, you know, what's gonna happen is, you know, is it glued rather than properly, you know, keyed and everything. You know, there's a lot of things to look at when you really break down a $250 sword, even if on its surface level it looks as pretty as $1,000 sword. But that's just kind of the way it goes sometimes. But anyway, but yeah, so then, you know, moving on to what we have next, we have the so we got the Royal Armories out of the way. Again, beautiful sword, 1-to-1 replica. The reason why I love the Royal Armories so much is because they are 1-to-1 replicas. Handle wraps, leather, they use whatnot. They don't. And see, and that's the thing. That Type 14 I just showed is a lot prettier simply because of the grip wrap I did. A lot of my windlasses are prettier looking because of the grip wraps I did. When you go for the bulky old standard windlass, which honestly, I don't think I still have one that is a standard one because I normally refinish them all. Actually, I do. I have my 15th century Type 19 longsword. And I mean, that's a standard windlass leather scab. Now, this one's really cool. This one's hard to argue because, oh, it's going great. Thanks, CJ. You know, this one has the nice dual leather wrap, which is really a big thing. And this is another one of those, you know, late 2000s, early 2010 swords from Windlass. They were really nice. I mean, they're not super pretty, perfect, but I mean, these things were going for $150, $250 back when they were new. And it's a dual ring longsword that's put together really well. But then again, this one is not peen. This is another one of those screw-ons. But honestly, I'm screwing the crap out of it. Try to get it off. You ain't going to get it off. Plus, as I mentioned, it's a full tang under here. There's not a spot weld or a rat tail or anything like that. It's a full tang, and they thread the end of the tang. They round the end of the tang and thread it to put on the pommel. So the pommel is affixed to the tang. So unless you screw this off, this sword isn't going anywhere. Unless those threads shred or break, which they're nice, thick, strong threads, it's going to hold up. Honestly, I would trust this sword. I've trusted windlass swords because they're actually threaded on the tang rather than spot welded to the tang, like the Hanwei Tinkers and a few others like that, or these Chinese ones. You know, because of that, because that's a fall point. All it takes is for that little thread to go wiggle, wiggle, especially cold steel. Cold steel is notorious for that because they spot weld the screw-on tang end. You know, but yeah, but this one, but see, you see how it has that kind of rough stitch, side stitch, and it's just this kind of pleathery leather. It's not really nice leather. But I mean, at the time, I mean, you were paying $200 for this. And this is a nice sword for $200. And that's where a lot of people argue, you know, especially back in the day when you get like the sword snobs. They'll be like, oh, well, you know, I have my Albion and it's so much better than your Windlass and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, but you paid $1,200 for your Albion, even back in, you know, 2010. I paid $200 for this. And I don't see those bottles getting cut any better than with this one. But again, you get what you pay for. You pay for that refinement. This guy isn't as pretty. He's kind of a clunky bastard. The fit and finish is a lot more clunkier. That ricasso isn't as blended as it probably could be. The cross section is diamond rather than hexagonal. The distal tapering is not super good. East Coast 1 a.m. checking in. Hey, awesome. All right. Hey, what's up, David? Nice to see you again from the Matt and me live stream. But yeah, it's like you sit there and so you got that. And that was $200 20 years ago, almost. I mean, shit, 20 years ago. Geez, not 20 years ago, 15 years ago. But anyway, yeah, you know, 2010, you could buy that sword for, you know, hell, nothing. But Cleveland, nice. Yeah, you guys are all far away. I know I'm over on the West Coast. I'm in Idaho. So, you know, yeah. So, But anyway, but yeah, so that's what's nice about these Royal Armory swords. It's a real step up. And a good testament of that is, you know, and here, let me see if I can get it out without making too big of a mess. I can. Is this big two-handed 15th century two-handed sword. Because this is the Royal Armories version. But anybody that's been around the block knows that Windlass had, and they called it the English two-handed sword. Awesome, awesome. You have a sword collection too, but only katanas. Hey, nothing wrong with that. You know, I have katanas. Like I said, I was showing off some of my katanas earlier since it's first live speed. So this is a Shinsakuto made by Kanamase II in 2022 in Sekigifu province. So yeah, so I got katanas too. But yeah, I really got focused on, yeah, this is a really big two-handed English sword. And you know, and it's English style. It's kind of what you would consider a two-door hilt. It's got the, you know, style 11 guard with the lobe terminals. And then the, you know, it depends on how you want to say it. I consider it a T2 because it's not as chamfered, but I mean, you can consider it a V or a V1 or a T2. I kind of consider it more of a T2 because of the shape, because you look at the shape, it doesn't have the arching shape as it does. Are you a blacksmith too? No, but you are a blacksmith. Awesome. That is awesome to hear. You know, I was actually talking about you guys, you apprentices and you lower level smiths earlier when I was talking about that Shinsakuto I got, and just kind of the backstory to that. So I don't want to get back into it because I'm on another subject and I have about enough habit rambling off and losing track with certain viewers anyway. But yeah, I did give a shout out to you guys earlier. So if you want to rewind it, I think these save, don't they? Live feeds. Well, me and Matt saved, so I'm assuming this does. So if anybody wants to watch this and wants to hang out for the 2 hours, yeah, rewind it and you can see Had a Deal Wizard I've been watching. He's a deal wizard I have been watching. Oh no, but yeah, look back and you can hear my whole story about that Shinsakuto that I acquired a few years ago. It's a really good story, and especially for you Japanese smiths, because I don't know if you were aware of that going on, but definitely go check it out. But anyway, back to what I'm saying is Windlass made this sword originally as they called it the English two-handed sword, and it was all blue. And, you know, it was nice. Was it as refined as this? But that just goes to show that is a perfect one. And I think Matt Easton, who is in collaboration with this Royal Armories line, did a really good video on the comparison, side-by-side comparisons, because he has the original English two-handed sword. And he loves it. He loved it because it was a really good replication. And he said, that's the thing. He's like, a lot of people give Windlass a hard time because they're two-dimensionally one-to-one, or they're two-dimensional swords. And he said, this English two-handed sword, I've handled this sword because he was handled this sword. That's why he chose it as one of the first batch of Royal Armory swords, because it's been one of his personally favorite swords. You know, he said, he's like, this is a lot like the original. There's a few fit and finish things that were just a little more simple because budget cuts and stuff, but you got to remember the English two-handed sword was $250 when it was on the market, and this guy's, you know, closer to $800, and it's just a lot of it because of his size. But still, you know, if you had one, I mean, could you notice the differences? Yeah, absolutely. But that's also the same thing with the Albalons and everything. You know, you're going to notice the differences in the level of fit and finish and quality because that's what you're paying for. And if you're not, then what are you paying for? What are you doing? And I think that's what's important when we look at these swords is to kind of judge them in the price tier. Because again, it's easy to say a Windlass is a piece of crap. Well, it's a piece of crap compared to a $1,000 sword. Well, sure. But then again, that's like the car analogy. It's like, okay, well, yeah, my Dodge Challenger Hellcat 2 is faster than your Dodge Dart. You know, is the Dodge Dart a nice little speedy, economical vehicle? Absolutely. Is it that bad of a vehicle? No, there's a lot worse out there. But, you know, the refinement in the engine and all that make the Hellcat, or even just the standard, SRT or, V8 is enough, to differentiate the two. And sometimes that matters to some people, sometimes it don't. And I made that analogy to Matt. It's like, what's the point of having a Ferrari if you're going 60 miles an hour anyway, because that's the speed limit? And that's not the point. The point is to own a Ferrari, just like it is to own an Albion or own a Valiant Armory. You own it because you want that level of attention to detail and quality. And that's what they sell their swords on. And there's nothing wrong with that. Some people can be just as happy with a $250, sword ear, or a $300 Windlass, or a $150 Topeka. Exactly. You don't. And, would it be cool to have a Ferrari? Absolutely. I've always had a joke that if you own a Ferrari, the only thing that can play in it on the radio or MP3 player is the Magnum PI theme. It's just my rule. If I owned a Ferrari, it would be red, it would be topless, and I would be blaring Magnum PI theme at 20 decibels. Yeah, there we go. That's just me. I mean, the same thing. Same with me with the Lamborghini. I mean, if you're opening up a Lamborghini door, you better hear Miami Vice coming out of it, and you better be wearing pastels. Something turquoise at least, or pink. But anyway, yeah. But I mean, that's the thing. We can enjoy what we enjoy, and that's the thing. And back to the subject of what makes me love these Royal Army swords is that they're 1-to-1 replicas. I'm 47. I'm all in. All right, I'll be 42 in August, so we're pretty close to each other. So but yeah, no, 80s. Obviously, honestly, David. We're both Davids. Can you say that you like swords because of the 80s? Because I brought up that earlier. I brought it up with Matt too. Me and both Matt were talking about like G.I. Joes and He-Man and stuff. But can you definitely say that being an 80s kid, and you were a couple years older than me, so you got to enjoy a little bit more at a better age. I was enjoying He-Man and stuff at like 4 or 5 years old, and I was still kind of out of the loop because He-Man was starting to kind of phase out, by the time I really got into him. But can you say that 45, Conan the Barbarian, Highlanders, exactly. So yeah, see, we're all kind of in that same age group, because that's how it was with me. I mean, everything in the 80s seemed to have a sword in it. My big favorite movie that I melted the tape on watching it and rewinding, there was two. Of course, I was a He-Man guy, so the Dolph Lundgren Masters of the Universe, played the crap out of that growing up. I still have my original VHS and from that, so that's a pretty cool collectible. But also it was Willow. Willow was awesome. Mad Mardigan and the swords and General Kale and his skull mask and his it was like a flame bridge, but it was obviously unique, but it was literally like he had like a flame bridge, a long sword variant of like a flame bridge, and I remember like just the sound effect when in the movie when Mad Mardigan kind of flips it up with his foot and stabs Kale with his own sword, and you hear that going into him. But yeah, no, the 80s swords, Conan, exactly. You brought up Conan the Barbarian, and movies definitely made me have an affinity for swords. And see, that was the same with me, because being more, like I said, being a little younger than you and being more late 80s lean, you guys were right there in the midst of like Thundercats and G.I. Joe and He-Man. I was more, you know, in that elementary days, it was Ninja Turtles, and ninjas had taken over. Another big influence for getting me into martial arts and wanting to study karate and stuff, and all my buddies wanting to study karate was the Three Ninjas ninja movie, you know, with the kids. And that was so cool for us anyway, because we're like those kids' age. And who doesn't want to live, especially as a kid, doesn't want to live with the fantasy of, you know, kicking an adult's ass. And if you know karate, you can kick an adult's ass. I mean, those movies were complete, you know, there's no way three little kids and you know, oh, I've had to stop myself from buying a Sword of Omens. You know, the only Sword of Omens I would buy, and he's up there, spendy, would be Jeffrey Robinson, 1981 kid here. See, yeah, we're all in the same age. So yeah, we're all a bunch of over the hill sword 80s guys. But it's cool to be an 80s guy. You know, everyone, I get my kids always are rolling their eyes at me. I'm like, oh, Dad, whatever. It's like, no, it was honestly cooler in the 80s. And, you know, growing up in that 80s and 90s, there was so much fun stuff, and everything just seemed cooler. Everything seemed to taste better too. I own the Ryan Sword version. It's functional. Yeah, they do. Ryan Sword does do a Sword of Omens, and it's nice. But the one that I saw, the one be all, because he does them all, is Jeffrey Robinson. I don't know if you know Jeffrey Robinson. Look up Bronze by JeffreyRobinson.com. He is an amazing swordsmith. He's an old friend from Sword Buyer's Guide. We've chatted for years. I've known the guy, and he is, yeah, he does great. He does absolutely great work. And, you know, but yeah, Jeffrey does a Sword of Omens. He does a Dolph Lundgren Sword of Grayskull. He does two variants of the Sword of Power. He does the cartoon variant that looks like the cartoon. And then he does one that looks more like the action figure / Golden Books He-Man sword. But yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. The 80s is definitely a big culprit of why I am in swords and martial arts and ninjas and all that. Wanted me to get into karate and learning swords. You know, my first functional sword was a Paul Chin Hanwei practical katana. And I took that to the dojo and I studied with it and everything. And I learned, you know, kenjutsu with that. And then what evolved me into European swords was more or less, I kind of wanted a European sword anyway, because once I started getting into collecting functional swords, it was kind of it's a slippery slope, as all sword collectors know. It's kind of like Pringles. You once you pop, you can't stop. You can't just eat one. Bet you can't just eat one. Because what it was is I had my katana. I had my I had my Hanwei practical katana. And the problem with it is the same thing everybody had with the practical katana. The Ito wasn't alternating on those originals from like the early 2000s. The Samagawa was plastic. The Suka was glued on. And the Itomaki was this cheap suede. Just closed up at work. Time to head home. All right, bud. All right, A-Freak. Thanks for joining me. Hey, Robert. Robert's on. Hey, bud. I'll be 55 next month. And yes, 80s definitely affected my love of swords. Conan and Excalibur both came out. I was 10 or 11, been hooked every day since. See, you're in that prime age, that Gen X, early 80s, where, you know, like, I guess the nerdy way to say it today would be like, you're a Stranger Things kid. You know, you were right there at that perfect 10 to 15-year-old age to really appreciate and enjoy a lot of the cinema and things that were coming in, as long as like the fantasy and playing D&D and all that stuff. I only recently got the Eurobug the past year. See, and that's the thing, like with me, I mean, I got it, like I said, back in like 2009, 2008, and I thought I could supplement it. I get so many nice swords that they don't alternate the Ito on the final product. It can cause major issues. It can, and it's completely untraditional. And that's what's so frustrating with a lot of, you know, kind of the katanas, you know, the mass-produced katanas on the market today, is that usually, at least back in the 2010s, if you were paying like $250 or more on a production katana, you were guaranteed alternating Ito. I mean, it was a selling point because the community commanded it and demanded it. Now, not so many people do, or they don't think about it. And you know, one of the big guys that really focused me on proper iromaki and sukamaki is he goes by Frank the Bunny, and I don't know if any of you guys know Frank, but Josh is his real name. But Josh has been another SBG buddy of mine for a lot of years. Chatted with him for years, shared, you know, discussed reviews and stuff. And Josh or Frank, he's a great guy, and he was one of those that could not stand the crappy Itomaki, Sukamaki on katanas, and he was a big katana fan and a big katana, you know, a big katana user and collector, and anyway, he decided, you know what, screw it, I'm going to learn how to wrap them myself. And he did, and he eventually became a business. I mean, for most of the 2010s, if you wanted a nice and affordable Sukamaki job done on a production, Frank is great, taught me lots. Yeah, me too. I love Josh. Josh he's such a cool guy. And he was one of those that I was sorry to see go, because he kind of got trapped in that early 2000s BS when it came to the great vendor battles or manufacturer battles of 2012 on Sword Buyers Guide Forum. And he kind of just gave everyone the middle finger. That was kind of because he called a lot of bullshit on a lot of the manufacturers that were claiming, you know, oh, Silk Ito and this and that. And I won't say names because it doesn't matter, but there was a lot of them that were fluffing and BSing. And he called them on. He's like, this isn't silk. It melts. It's synthetic. And you know, and that was the thing. So Josh started wrapping handles himself. He was a big fan of using nubuck, which is like a kind of a soft leather, and it was synthetic, but it was like a synthetic leather, and it was really nice. He did some really good stuff with it. To have it done, first to learn to wrap beetle myself. Now I'm out and make what I want. See, and that's kind of like with me. I mean, like I said, with my grip wraps, you know, I learned how to do grip wraps from another really good, you know, swordsmith that came from Sword Buyer's Guide. Definitely check him out if you haven't. Brennan Asvalski from fableblades.com. And Breno is awesome. He's a really cool guy. Well, they have, and that was the thing. That was the trick, especially with a few of those brands that were doing the synthetic and claiming it was silk, because it was done. It wasn't like the itchy, scratchy crap, you know. It was the good stuff, and they you know, and they passed it off as silk because a lot of the guys that didn't know any better, they thought it was really silk, and it was believable, and you know, and it was all right, but you know, but it wasn't, because then it was like, well, this is BS. You're not honest. You're not being honest with us, and even though and that was the thing is that was the sales pitch back then was, ooh, you can get Silk Ito and real steel fittings and all that jazz for $250, $300, and then it's like, okay, cool, yay, and then all of a sudden you look at it and you're like, oh wait, this isn't what it's supposed to be. But one of the few things is that you tweak a few of those fit and finish issues, like alternating Ito, and all of a sudden you're standing above the $500 sword that technically has better materials, but they didn't alternate. Because what's the point of a Hineri Maki wrap if it's not going to alternate? Because it's just going to slide off. You're going to work it through your fingers, and eventually, even if it's wrapped really tight, even if they add a layer of glue on the side of the suka, it's going to eventually slide down, especially if the kashira isn't properly fitted. Well, that's the thing with cotton. I prefer cotton too. I like the feel of cotton over silk or even the synthetic silks, because I think it's not as slippery. And honestly, yeah, I'll take a cotton handle. You know, it's like this one. You know, obviously on this one it's silk, and it's Tazando silk, silk black, and it's nice, and it's that Japanese silk, so it doesn't feel, you know, ironically, you know, for all the hype, you know, everybody probably thinks in hindsight that the Japanese silk feels like silk, like ooh, like nice silk sheets, and you want to roll on it and take a nap. But really, it feels more like cotton. It's more absorbent. It's more thicker. It's a little coarser. I mean, it's still soft and smooth to the fingertips, but it doesn't feel like slippy silk. You know, I guess you could say it's more work focused. And that's what I like about the Japanese silk. You know, I only have the Japanese silk on the Tazando because, I mean, I lucked out and got that. It's not something that I would probably buy because it's overpriced. You know, not overpriced as in I think it's overpriced. I mean, it's costly, and it's just not something that I would want to buy and then murder with me trying to do my version of Tsukamaki. What's the purple-handed sword? It does, certain ones, and also a few other ones that I've had, you know, already have that. Like I've gotten some of like the Jakku. I have that Jakku anniversary sword, and it's got the synthetic, but the way it's wrapped and the way like the texture is, it's almost like it's pre-hardened. It like, I mean, that ain't going anywhere, and you feel the grip in your hand, and even though it feels synthetic-y and kind of that silky plastic, it still feels a lot firmer than say like my Ronin Katana Suka, or even like I've gotten a few of the Ronin Katana like a standalone Sukas to replace, because it's a cheap alternative for like my brother has a katana I gifted him as one of my first katanas. It was like a 1045 throw hardened. I mean, it's a decent katana, but it's nothing to write home about. Your standard like Musashi level, you know, $125 sword, like that what I paid for it, you know, 10 years ago. But you know, the Suka was pretty rough and junky, so I ended up getting one of those Ronin ones and fitting it on it because it fit, but it worked. But anyway, somebody asked what this sword was. So I did a video on this one, the purple-handed one. This is that Jimbo Curry Witcher sword. So this is another like kind of semi-custom or custom build. So this one is, and I got a full, if you want to see kind of like a full video on it, I have this segment called What's on the Rack, where I kind of do basically what I'm doing now on this live feed. I guess I'm killing views of my What's on the Racks because I'm basically doing a big live What's on the Rack, good when people ask. But next to the blue, I don't have a purple one next to the blue one. That's black, and this is like a darkish red. And that darkish red one here, that is the Royal Armories 14th century hand and a half sword. So that's the that's the Royal Armories war sword that's on museum replicas. But anyway, yeah, if you want to see this one, I got this one on What's on the Rack, and I talk about it. But yeah, it's a pretty cool custom Witcher sword. It's got the wolf medallion on it. It's pretty much a printed Armory sword because it's got the custom Jimbo grip. It's got the printed Armory fittings, and then it's got a Hanwei Rhinelander blade. So similar to like the Jesse Blesky I just pulled out and showed, it's basically just a custom fitted sword. It's basically a blade on printed Armory fittings with a custom grip. And then the scabbard's actually a Balor Arms 2nd gen 15th century longsword, which actually fits it. Anyway, no, this one, I'll pull this one out one more time since we've been talking about Royal Armory swords anyway. And this is one of my favorite swords anyway. I'm working on a review for this one. Ironically, with all the extra stuff that's going on with the channel, what the channel's core focus on was reviews. And then, no, you got it. Thought it was different. Oh yeah. Oh, okay. So I guess you did want to see that one. Yeah, it's a style 12, so it's got the S guard with the double rings. It's got a fancy name to it. on the Printed Armory. You can go to jessebleski.com and look at all the Printed Armory fittings, and you'll see that. But yeah, it's got that withering pommel and the style 12 guard. And what's really cool about it is that it is kind of accented, it's got these floral accents. I don't think I really showed that well in the what's on the rack. But anyway, that pommel hurts my soul, bro. Is it just, you think it's bad, or do you just not like the two-tone color, or are you not a fan of them adding the wolf pommel on it, or the flowers are wicked? Yeah, they are. And just kind of like how the ring guards kind of connect, kind of like their kind of stems, like so. But yeah, it's pretty cool and really unique because, like I said, when Printed Armory first came out, I think his name was Mike. I can't think of it right now, but I'm pretty sure he was he's just a forum member, and he wanted to do that size, no, the other big one. So, so the one I did originally have, yeah, it does have the Witcher wolf on it. That's really all that makes it a Witcher sword, is that little wolf medallion. But yeah, it's but the Printed Armory fittings are great. Go check out jessebleski.com and check out those. They're really nice for anyone that has like a custom sword or like they're primarily made for Hanwei Tinker blades, but you can use them for other stuff. Like I said, I got my Sword of Roven here. Let's see if I can slide them up a little bit and show you. I don't know if you can see that pommel all that well. Let's get it high. But that is a Printed Armory pommel. It's a Type U pommel that's on the Printed Armory lineup. And I just wanted to add a little aesthetic to my Roven, and I put that on. So I actually got a lot of Printed Armory stuff and didn't think about it. So I got the pommel, I got this hilt fittings, I got these on the Jesse Bleski hilt fittings. So actually I got more Printed Armories than I really thought. But anyway, no worries, no bads at all. No bads, KF1. So anyway, so yeah, if this was the one you're talking about, and it's weird because it does kind of look purplish, but it's more of a dark red. And yeah, this is the 14th century one. Now, this is actually a second iteration of it. And I was going to mention that in the review, because one thing that I had is, and this is one thing why I love museum replicas, because they really have your back as a vendor, and when things kind of go south. And it wasn't like a big deal, but my original 14th century hand and a half sword was anyway, okay, I'm home. All right, good. Glad to hear you made it safe. Similar, and it looks in the hand nicely. Yeah, it does. The wasted grips, and the hourglass grips, they just kind of nicely form to the hand. And it's kind of, the design is from the more of like the 16th century, and I mean, they were used in the 14th, 15th, and 16th century, but you see a lot of them on like the bastard swords of the the 16th century, and just that wasted grip, and it just kind of locks your hand in. There was so much ingenuity with the with the medieval smith and what they did, and just the designs and everything. It's just, it's crazy, the twisted grip. Yeah, so yeah, like kind of like how you kind of see it with, because are you talking about that, like how it's kind of hourglass shaped? But yeah, you're talking about like the leather, like the risers, and how the risers kind of helix. Yeah, that's a helix. So like the helix grip. Yeah, it is, because your fingers kind of just clean, because that's what risers are for. Risers are to help. No, the one in the back with the rings. Oh, this one right here that had the pommel. They do, and that's what risers are really aesthetically pleasing. But you know, their purpose is, of course, to help your fingers and keep your hand in place. Because see, that's why there's always one up here on the ring finger, because you kind of squeeze it in. Okay, Dave. Yeah. So that one I did myself. If you want to see that one get made, Dave, go check out my grip wrap tutorial. And that's the sword I grip wrap in that tutorial, is that Sword of Rovin. And I do that, and it's actually not a helix. That one's not a helix. It's just a set of round risers that go all the way down the grip. Similar, more actually, that one I was kind of copycatting another Lord of the Rings sword sort of with that design was Anduril, because you know how his, you know, the black part, you know, the leather part of the grip on Narsil or Anduril has the risers, you know, the tight risers. Yeah, your fingers will find them. That's the whole point of them, and that's where, like I said, anyone that, I mean, you can do a design, but I learned doing grip wraps that if you don't do it right and you do it like just to kind of make it look cool, it can be uncomfortable. And honestly, if you're going to do wraps yourself, kind of like I do, because my swords are my swords primarily. I mean, of course, we can always sell them or trade them or whatever. But when I look to grip wrap, when I grip wrap a sword, I'm kind of looking at what's effective to me. And like I said, I don't have super big hands, you know, kind of medium-sized hands. So, you know, with someone else that has a larger hand, this center riser is actually going to go right where it needs to be, which is kind of on the pinky finger, and it'll go in between, and then you'll have your offhand where your pinky will go in on the pommel here and hold in between the riser and the pommel, and then your fingers will kind of hold up and right in. Now, someone with a larger hand is going to have to kind of push their hands together. With me, since I got a smaller hand, I can kind of openly grip it. But see, that's also the other thing. Now, it works twofold, because the primary grip is you want to hold it, you know, just right, you know, below the guard, which keeps your finger from that guard, if you that. Or if you do like to handshake grip or finger the pommel, you know, you can utilize that upper riser to kind of squish your fingers in. With you know, with this, you know, if I'm doing it two-handed and like with a smaller hand, I still have that resistance. It's almost like, it's not obviously as prominent as a pommel, but when I use it one-handed, that riser, see, my hand kind of wants to stop anyway on that riser. So if I'm holding it single-handed and, you know, I'm trying to push it off, it's going to, you know, it's definitely going to do that. Mina hands are perfect swords. My buddy has massive hands, and anything less than 11 inches, he struggles in holding. Yeah. And that's the same like with Viking swords. You know, people are always like, there's a pro and con with Viking swords. Either the handle is too big because it's not historically accurate, it's too big, it's got too much gap, which of course the manufacturers do to compensate, you know, buddies like your friends with larger hands. And then there's ones that are, you know, traditionally 3 inches, and even a medium-sized hand is kind of just squishing in there, and it's like, you know, geez, you know, it's like, you know, give me a little grip. But it's also a learned behavior, because kind of like what I was talking with Matt on the other sword feed, because Matt's not a fan of Viking swords, and he's pretty adamant that he's not a fan of Viking swords. And I told him, I was like, well, you just have to respect how to use them. And Matt doesn't care, because Matt likes to use swords how he uses swords, and he's very focused on Japanese. He holds a sword like a Japanese sword. Even when you watch him in his cutting videos, and you know, it's nothing wrong. Everybody has their style. Everybody has their style. But when you draw out a Japanese sword and you hold it traditionally, now usually in the movies you see them, they hold it right up here, you know. But no, you handshake it and you hold it just right below the fuchi, and you put your fingers into the diamonds. You get a nice, comfortable feel, and knuckle out, and then you mostly grip it with your backhand, and then like with your forefingers, with your forefingers, and see, you got that nice handshake kind of grip. I fucking hate as someone of Norwegian descent, I hate fucking Viking swords. Well, here's the thing, kind of like I told Matt, nobody wants to shoot a musket either, because boom, oh no, I missed. You know, 20 minutes later, you're shooting your next round. Who wants to do that? And that's the same thing with the Viking sword. What is a Viking sword? It is, in comparison, when you're talking swords, it is, for example, the bolt action rifle to the automatic rifle, you know, or the pistol, you know. It's the old, you know, 6-shooter to the semi-automatic magazined, you know, Glock or something, you know, something more handy, efficient. What is the difference between this and a Viking sword? I mean, overall, they're both cruciform, double-edged style swords. The difference is how they are able to be used and handled, because this again has a short grip. It's not really much bigger than a Viking sword, but because of the way the grip is and the maneuverability, you can finger it different. You can handle it different. The wheel palm allows you to do a handshake grip. Sword is a sort of Viking holds. They took everything. Nice. But, you know, but I think you guys get it. You know, you get kind of the gist of what I'm saying. You know, a Viking sword is meant to be gripped like a Viking sword. And if you don't like to grip like a hammer grip, like a Viking sword grip, it's going to be uncomfortable. And that's where, like, sometimes some Viking swords are better than others. Because, for example, and actually I'm going to just put the katana away because I'm getting so many swords out here. I don't want to start knocking them over. But yeah, Viking sword. So, like, for example, with this Viking sword, which is the Graham, it's got the type AE or hilt, because AE it's in Scandinavian, which is how they technically pronounce it, the A/E. But I just say AE because I don't want to go all day. But anyway, you sit there. Anyway, so you sit there, and like with this one, you can kind of finger the pommel, and you can get more of a handshake grip. If you watch my cutting video, a lot of my cuts are like this because it is more comfortable. It's also more of my trained method. Like I said, kind of like Matt, I come from katanas. I came from cutting with a katana two-handed. And that's why, like I said, most people that study Kendo or Kenjutsu tend to lean towards long swords over arming swords, because having a one-handed sword just doesn't make sense in them. They naturally want to put their second hand on it. Now, can you wield this two-handed? Yeah. But it's awkward because your hand's not really supposed to be there, but you can. Nobody's saying you can't hold a Viking sword that way. You know, it's not like someone's going to smack your hand and say, no, you got to hold it hammer grip only with a shield and burr, burr, burr. I mean, that's how we think they used it. But honestly, we don't really know what they used it. But yeah, you know, it's pretty, but yeah, it's not the best to handle. If someone said you have the choice, kind of like that guy that did the whole Mike Tyson fight hypothetical, yeah, it does. And, you know, and that's the thing is that, well, I wouldn't say super centuries later, but I mean, when you start getting into the Norman cruciform hilts, which had the, you know, the Gestalt type spike hilts, the straight cross guards, the initial cruciform hilts, you know, you could definitely see how they were fingering them, especially horseback, because that was the thing with the Normans. They were horsemen. And so they used horses, and that was like their big thing was horseback. And so when you look at it from that aspect, you know, and you have an arming sword or even a long sword, because that's another misconception. A lot of people don't think that these types of two-handed swords were used on horse, and they were pretty prominently. And you know, a lot of the Crusaders would use a two-handed sword on a horse, you know, even two-handed, because you could still go. I watched the guy showing traditional Viking sword moves. He was incredible, but I couldn't generate the power he did with drop cutting over a shield. Exactly. It's like with anything, training and practice, training and practice. So the same thing, you know, you can finger this guard and, you know, boom, and get in. But also it handles different because it's a different blade type. And that's where I think it's so important for the study of like the Oakeshott typology and stuff, because what it does is it teaches you the differences in the blades and how they were used. A type 18 is significantly different than a type 10 or 10A Viking or Norman era style sword. They're just used different. I mean, this is a quintessential cut and thrust blade. It prominently definitely makes sense from horseback. Lower response times due to high speed and less need for defense. Absolutely, because you're pretty much, the horse can do the work for you. Because you got to think about it. You got this big, powerful animal that you're riding, and he's charging into the battlefield, a cavalry. And normally you're going to have a spear or a lance, and you're just going to skewer everybody, because just the force of that horse running, just that horse running, no one's stopping that horse. I don't care who you are. If a horse is on full gallop, especially if it's armored, it's going to run you over. That is a big, strong animal. Nobody wants to get bumped by a horse when you're just in the corral and it's just being a pain in the ass, which horses can do. Me, I'm definitely a foot soldier. I'm not a knight. I've been on a horse 3 times in my life, and that was good enough for me. But, and that's coming here in rural Idaho where everybody's riding horses. I got 5 friends that have horses, and it's like, hey, want to ride? No, I will ride my 4-wheeler. It doesn't have a brain, and it won't get mad at me and buck me off if I do something stupid, or maybe it just doesn't like me that way. I mean, I love horses. I love all animals, but at the same time, yeah, I'm a foot soldier for sure. But anyway, the horse is a weapon itself. Absolutely, it is. I mean, God, you watch this stuff, and it's like the famous scene on Braveheart where they use the spears and stick all the horses. And yeah, is that probably, yeah, that was used, that method of what was used in history. Technically, historically used by Robert the Bruce, not Wallace at Stirling Bridge. Stirling Bridge was kind of a 300 style battle where he got all the English to pompously get on the bridge, and then they basically just knocked them off all the bridge and drowned them in the river. Which, like I said, I don't know, if I was a knight, and I get it, do what the king commands, do what the Lord commands, but at the same time, I'm passing out, y'all. Good night. Fun stream. Glad to have been here. Catch y'all on the sword tubes. Absolutely, bud. We'll see ya. Thanks for hanging out and with us for the whole deal. Odachi were meant to take out a horse. Yes, and so were, the other, the 2-handed great swords of medieval history. The length, definitely mattered. But even war swords and long swords were meant to combat men on horses, because it gives you that reach and leverage. You can reach up and stab them. It's kind of like, I always like to talk. I got and I'm probably over promoting. I mean, well, this is Dynamo Sword Channel, so I'm going to promote all my damn videos anyway. But I do have a nice discussion topic that honestly nobody ever really watched, and it kind of made me mad because I did it first, but because he had more views and more followers, his version got more views. But I did a really great episode of discussion topics on arming swords and talking about all the different arming swords and via typology and use, and even how the arming sword name was. But Shad did one too, and nothing against Shad. I like Shad. Me and Shad have chatted online and gotten along. I think he's a pretty cool guy. But obviously he did an arming sword video that was kind of more focused on kind of his style of video, where and he does focus on historical accuracy, but he doesn't really lean on the typology like I do. So I guess that's the difference. I'm more typology lean, so that's what my one is. But one thing that he missed, about arming swords is how they got their name, and it's rumored that they got their name from a battle and between French knights and German mercenaries in the 14th century. Basically, the Germans were using big 2-handed war swords like this guy, and they just weren't screwing around. I mean, they were just mauling through. They were armored. They had plate armor. They had these big 2-handed swords, and there's just the reach advantage and just the formation was just whooping the French. And so basically what happened is the the French kind of started one of the French one of the leaders kind of started noticing kind of in their strike formation that since they were using high guard, that their armpits were exposed from, you know, the armor, you know, the plate would go here. So they noticed that their whole arm and armpit were exposed. So they started using, you know, kind of that thrust technique into the arm. They'd wait for them to raise up the war sword to slice down, and then they would get in real quick. And they were using like kind of shorter thrust focus blades, like 15s and 14s. And so they're nice and short, so they're able to get in and close and do those quick studs. And they were attacking the arm, which they were started calling them the single-handed cut and thrust swords, or thrusting swords, arming swords. And that's where we get the terminology of arming sword, is from the French. But yeah, if you want to know more about that, definitely go check out the channel, go check out discussion topics, arming swords. It's a really good watch. It's my old format, so I'm pretty sure by the time I did arming swords, I was using a mic. I know some of my videos, some of you guys probably like, oh my God, can't stand it. You know, because they're kind of echoey, and you know, they were very more amateur with, you know, and I was just being cheap. I didn't buy a mic, you know, back then, but you know, it was 5 years ago, and I wasn't really thinking about it. I didn't know how far the channel would go, and you know, here I am 6 years later, still building it, but hopefully, you know, it's moving on up with all the extra stuff I'm doing. But yeah, definitely go check out that discussion topics about arming swords, because I put a lot of work into that, and I think it's a really good read, good watch, because I just kind of put a lot of heart and effort into it. But anyway, aside from that, you know, let's see. I would love an Odachi, but with the heavy blade presence in my hernia, I would probably hurt myself. I saw your episode. Shad is kind of cringe. You know, Shad can be. I think Shad's cool, but Shad is kind of, you know who Shad reminds me of, and it's kind of funny because I think that's why I kind of liked him when he first started going. I mean, he's always been kind of really loud. He's kind of toned that down, but you know, back in the day, that was like kind of his thing is yell really loud and, you know, finger shake and rah, you know, then that was kind of like the Shad thing. And I know that kind of rubbed people wrong. I also, what people don't realize is, and this is where I say the reference kind of ties in with me. You stopped showing in my feed. I'm sub now to fix it. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, definitely. You know, I don't know what it is either. I guess, and hopefully this live feed helps, and a few more of these helps, and some cross promotion, and maybe you guys even like, hey, you know, share my videos with some of your sword buddies and get me in, because I mean the algorithm just doesn't like me. I don't know if it's just because why, but it doesn't. Shad is the effing worst. You know, Shad can be, I guess. I don't want to talk smack about him, because I mean, I think he's done a lot for the sword community as far as sword tubers, but for the most part, you know, when he first started getting on, here, I'll give you a story about Shad, and maybe he'll watch this. Maybe he'll do a counter video and talk about me. But he was doing this really old video back when Shad wasn't Shad. Back when Shad was like kind of 2,000 subscribers Shad or whatever, and he had all these wooden swords. Because that's what he did. He built wooden swords because he couldn't get regular swords. Being on Australia, it's hard to get swords anyway. I know there's a few sword friends I have in Australia, you know, from Sword Buyer's Guide, and they say it's really tough to get swords in Australia, especially with their laws getting worse as time's gone on, you know, especially, you know, with the union and stuff. But anyway, I remember Shad used to have not plastic, but wooden swords he'd build himself. And he was talking about sword types, you know, single-handed swords, long swords. Well, you have a long sword, but then you have two-handed swords, but there's kind of a sword in between that's bigger than a long sword, but not as long as or big as a two-handed greatsword. And he's like, I don't know what to call that. And I was like, Shad, do your research. It's in the books. It's in the typology books and stuff. It's a war sword. That's what they were called. The later period two-handed swords that were large, but not as large as were considered war swords. You know, and that's 14th, 13th century. Now, when you get into you know, the post Renaissance, and you start getting into the two-handed and bastard swords, then those are the bastard swords. Yeah, I agree. Because here I am, I got like, what, 1,600, maybe more, thanks to this. I haven't checked. I mean, I've been on here 3 hours. I'm going to be, I guess I might as well beat me and Matt's record and go for over 3.8. So you'll at least get me till 3.10. But if you guys still want to hang out. But yeah, I don't get that either. I mean, it can be a little sad when you put a lot of work into something and you see 100 views. I mean, I've had that story more than not. It's sometimes why I go on my hiatuses, because it's like, well, why go? But in the meantime, it's like, yeah, it's frustrating. You know, what did I do wrong to the algorithm to where, you know, I'm only getting 50 views or whatever, a video. But then again, like I said, you look at some of my views and they're over 1,000 views. What's so great about those? Obviously, people are just wanting to click on those, but it's funny because the videos I think people would click on don't get clicked. And the videos I think, well, sort of, you know, maybe they'll like this, do get kicked. Full on. And I'm glad his sidekick started his channel. Yeah, I like that kid too, because you could definitely tell that he was more historically focused. Both of those guys were, because there was two of them. There was the younger guy with the dark hair and the beard, and then there was kind of the older guy that was kind of bald. And yeah, you know, and even when, you know, Shad would do like videos with his brother, and his brother has his own channel too where he does art, but when he was just having fun, it's kind of like you guys are going to see too, like sometimes, like, you know, I'm not really a natural athlete. I'm a good athlete, you know, but he spat with sellsword was the nail in the coffin. Yeah, I remember that. And yeah, it was kind of dumb. I don't know why any of us should fight. I know that I haven't made some friends, you know, and there's a few sword tubers that probably don't like me. I don't care, but at the same time, it's not like I'm looking to have a grudge on them. I mean, if they wanted to, you know, bury the hatchet, whatever, I'd be fine with it. You know, I don't even have any hate on them, you know, but there was a few of them that, and it all kind of more started on Sword Buyer's Guide, and maybe I'm just overreaching, but there was some animosity on Sword Buyer's Guide forum with a few guys that ended up being sword tubers, and, you know, you might even like a few of them, you know. I got to make nachos, be right back. But, you know, it's like, I don't have any grudges against anybody. I think we're, as sword tubers, we should be tighter together. And that's what I mean. And that's where I'm at. You know, it's like, you know, I guess it's late enough and I don't know who's up watching this, but I did get into a little spat, and it was ironically over Viking swords. The Sticklesad Viking sword with a certain sword tuber. I won't say names because I just don't want to be dirty, but if you know him, you know him. If you know the history, you might know the history. But basically, one of his first reviews he did was on the Sticklesad Viking sword. And he, you know, he did a decent review. But the thing about him is, and I get it, nobody wants to be treated dumb or whatever, but he said some things about it that just didn't make sense. And he also kind of had that attitude to where, and you can see even in his later videos, he's not a Viking sword guy, which is fine. Matt's not a Viking sword guy. You know, BC just said he ain't a Viking sword guy. You know, I mean, a lot of guys aren't Viking sword guys, and that's fine. But you got to, if you're going to review a sword, you got to be honest with it. You might not like it, but you can't call it bad just because you didn't like it. Just because you didn't like it didn't mean it's bad. It just means it's not for you. You know, I mean, some people might not like this guy because, you know, he's big, broad. He's a little bit on the flexible side because, you know, he's not a thrusting sword. He's not a cut and thrust sword. He's a war sword. That's why Oakeshott changed it to 12A from 16A. Everybody calls this a 16A. Look at Records of the Medieval Sword. He rescinded that and made it a 12A. Why? Because even though it has a flattened hexagonal profile, it's a war sword. It's not a cut and thrust sword. It's meant to cut. Look at that flexibility. It's like every other type 12 and 13. It is meant to cut. Can it thrust? Yeah, but it's meant to thrust. Again, I love the look and idea. I just can't use Viking swords. Doesn't mean they aren't bad. Means I'm not knowledgeable. Well, and that's the thing. And that's what I told this guy. I wasn't mean to him, but he took my constructive criticism as an insult, and he had a damn fit, and he deleted the written review. And after that, I started looking at the guy, and I was like, "Whoa, do we have insecurity issues or something? Come on, guy. This is just talking swords. I'm trying to help you." Because I had just did a review on the stickle set. I mean, hell, I got my stickle set right here, and it's too buried to dig out unless I want to stand up, so I ain't gonna bother with it. I'll just keep talking. But yeah, I'm sitting there with the with the stickle set, and I said, "Hey, nothing personal, but what you're describing is a misunderstanding of the balance of a Viking sword." He wanted a Viking sword that handled like a Type 18 arming sword. And that's just not what it is. They're two different swords, and they're two different swords for a reason. You know, it's just like back to the gun analogy. You're not going, if you love semi-automatic, if you love your semi-automatic AR-15, go into a bolt action rifle, you're going to hate it. You're going to hate it. This is the stupidest, heaviest, dumb, blocky gun ever. I got a, you know, well, why can't I snap, 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 pop, 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 pop? You know, same difference. And I tried to explain it to him like that with the Viking sword. It's just, it's a Viking sword. It's not for you. Doesn't mean it's a bad sword. It's actually a really nice Viking sword. It's one of Windlass's better Viking swords, the stickle sod. But you're giving it a hard time like it's the biggest piece of crap in the world. And that's all I said. It's not the biggest piece of crap in the world. If you want the biggest piece of crap in the world, go get one of the clunky Topikas that were made like 10 years ago and that are 4 pounds and are about that thick and got a big ugly handle that's half screwed on, half screwed off and lopsided. Now you got a piece of crap. The stickle said, no, it's a decent $200 sword. You know, it's a $200 sword anyway. So what are you comparing it to? You know, the Albion Vinland that you paid $1,000 for? Well, of course it ain't going to be like the Albion Vinland. You know, it doesn't even have the proper cross section because it's back in the day when Windlass wasn't doing lanicular cross sections on those types of swords. But after that, it's just we never saw eye to eye, and it wasn't through an effort of trying. It just kind of we never did. It just I don't know. I would love. And he knows who he is if he's watching, and I'm sure a few of you others know who he is if you haven't gotten the gist. He's done sword collaborations. It's one of the reasons why I've always felt like I've been a black sheep on the sword tuber market. And I mentioned that to Matt. You know, it's like you guys have never invited me to any of these. I've been around longer than just as long as most of you. I mean, the only reason why I wasn't doing videos back in the day when Skullgrim, and because see, that's another thing. Skullgrim, I knew Skullgrim when he was a noob on Sword Buyer's Guide forum in the mid 2000s. You know, he was. I remember his first review. It was the 5-lobe Viking sword by Windlass, and he did a written review on Sword Buyer's Guide. And you know, he was just one of us. He was just one of the guys. And then he got big on YouTube, and then he kind of, I guess, forgot where he came from. But you know, but yeah, same with Matt. You know, Matt, he was just a guy with the rest of us talking swords and learning swords. And best I can describe for a new user, LOL. Yeah, that's basically it. You know, Viking swords are meant to hack. They're not meant to duel and finesse. It's just how they're built, and it's because they were built for flanks. They were built for shield formations, just like a Spatha was. You know, a Roman Spatha or a Celtic Hallstatt or a German migration sword. They are meant to stand behind a shield and chop over, bam, bam, bam. It's Viking swords. But anyway, you know, I don't want to talk too much shit about people because I hate talking shit about people. I'm not here to talk shit about people. I'm here to make friends, talk swords, and have a good time. But I think one of the big things that kind of hurt me personally in the long run with my channel is having certain viewers, or not viewers, but certain other sword tubers have grudges against me. And then, like I said, yeah, I wasn't being invited to those group chats. I wasn't being invited to those. Like I said, I didn't start like Skullgrim and Matt early because I didn't have the technology. I was kind of a poor boy, and hell, especially where I was at up in northern Idaho, there wasn't a lot of options for internet. And I mean, hell, I remember for the times I did have internet, it was primarily dial-up, even in like the late 2000s, because that's all that was offered up there. And when we finally got like fiber optic internet, it was great, but still, I didn't own a computer and didn't have all this video technology. It's not like now where I can play on a phone, or something. I do the majority of my videos on my phone because my phone is capable enough. It does HD video, and I can do anything on the phone. I don't need a computer anymore. And that's why I'm on YouTube more frequently, because I don't need it. But that aside, it's just, I felt I was kind of black sheeped on a lot of things because I didn't get along with a few of those that got big fast. And then a lot of the guys that were new, that were coming up and collaborated with them, like I said, nobody was calling me or offering me anything, even when I would interact with them. And I think it was because, we don't like Dave because Dave made us mad on Sword Buyer's Guide Forum. I don't know if that's the case. That's how I felt. That's how I kind of somewhat feel a little. If that's true, whatever. Be mad at me. I'm willing to bury the hatchet. I don't care, because I don't need a clickbait grudge. I don't need, let's all have some fun and talk swords. There's no point. I'm really happy I caught you with Matt, so I found you again. Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. As much so kind of I watch, and like I told, it wasn't until I researched the Border Steel Sword and found your review and was shocked you hadn't been on my YouTube feed a lot sooner. Exactly. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's my area, region. Yeah, that's my original setting was at the bar I used to manage with my friend Jefferson, Huckin' Fins. But and honestly, that's kind of the pseudo why I left the bar, was to kind of focus more on the YouTube channel. Also to focus more on my daughters. Like I said, they're teenagers. They're getting to graduation age. My eldest is graduating this year. My youngest is a freshman going on being a sophomore. And the money was good, managing a bar, and then also my other primary job, my Monday through Friday job at the RCCI. But it was just getting on me. And I remember watching talk about Kanana at a bar, looking and saying, no one likes your collection. Nobody likes my collection because it was in a bar. Missing the 1982 Conan swords, whatever. Now you're going to I got it buried with all these other swords. So, damn it. Valor Legacy, I have the Conan sword. If you didn't know already, it's actually my most viewed. It's my most viewed video. I will get it out just for you. "1982 Conan the Atlantean." There you go, bro. There it is. My most viewed video. Over 65,000 views for this Conan the Atlantean. I think I have the highest viewed, which is ironic, because like I said, we were talking, Dave, about I'm basically a nobody. But for some reason, my Conan the Barbarian sword went moderately viral. It is, because it is so damn pretty, but it is very unwieldy. Like I said, you got to roll up your sleeves and, flex your muscles to, use this guy. But God, he about broke my table. He's so damn heavy. Almost as cool as the Fathers. The Fathers, it was on my to-buy list. And then, I don't know, I want it. And I was going to get the Windlass version to coincide with this one. And it is, a lot of people like it more aesthetically. Functionally, it is. It is more functional. It's not as pretty. Like I said, there's something about ricassos and the languets that really just turn people on with this sword. It's why it's so copied. If you see any magic swords, they got languets usually because of this sword. And, nothing historically actually really has these languets. You have the ricasso, grip ricasso, like on two-handed swords, like Zweinhanders and stuff, but nothing, as prominent to where there's actually metal that goes up. Or at least on European swords, which this is kind of based off of, But overall, yeah, it's not a, it's definitely not, very user-friendly. I've always liked the theory on this, that the design of it, even though it's not really embellished on, but, it was supposed to be a giant sword. And in that sense, that it's more or less of a giant's two-handed sword like it is to a man, but it's a, it's like a giant's arming sword or a giant short sword. So that's why it has the ricasso, because the giant was just using it to like kind of pick and stab, with it, rather than, I think it's more visually appealing as well. Funny, because I prefer flowers and insects, but that moose skull. Yeah, and that's like me. Like, I like this one because I love the lingots. I love that general shape of this. That's what appeals to me fantasy wise. Personally, the father sword kind of turns me off because of the skull and because of the horns. I think just the skull looks, I get the carving, but at the same time it's just kind of like because it's a skull, I guess. I don't know. Or like, because it's supposed to, it would seem like it would be like a natural moose skull, like almost like a barbarian put it together, and it should be like just an actual skull, like, oh, we're going to put the end of a skull on the, I don't know. My brother, opposite. He loves the father's sword. He loves the Sumerian father's sword. I'm an Atlantean guy. So that's why I had to get the Atlantean. And I went through a lot to get the Atlantean. This Atlantean, I ended up buying from exactly the opening forge scene, which actually featured, I don't know if you know this, little behind the scene fun movie trivia, actually featured Jody Sampson. He's the one that's making, the sword and pouring and forging and all that. In face shots, it's oh gosh, I can't believe it's late, so I can't remember the actor's name, but Conan's father is his actor. I mean, he was in everything. He was awesome action star in the 70s and 80s. But fought Clint Eastwood in Any Which Way But Loose. But yeah, I can't think of his name right now. But yeah, that was Jody Sampson, the original maker. He was doing that forge scene, and which was kind of cool that they snuck him into the video there. But anyway, the Conan sword is just, it's iconic. You got to have it. You got to have it. It's the quintessential 80s fantasy sword. It's the quintessential fantasy sword. Almost every sword design from Conan on has been inspired by this sword. Even He-Man sword. You could say, well, it's kind of sort of, but because He-Man sword's kind of like an overbuilt sai. I've always looked at the sai and been like, well, that's kind of like He-Man sword, because you just kind of bend them a little more. But overall, it still has that wasted ricasso and the flare out. And rather than the lingots are open, so you have gap between the blade and the lingots. But yeah, same thing. He-Man sword, same thing. The Dolph Lundgren He-Man sword, pretty much the Conan Atlantean sword, just shorter lingots. You have, what else do you have? You have, of course, like, and I did it when I was talking about the Conan sword in Sword News a few episodes back with the Black Dragon Forge unlicensed version, which I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Have you guys seen that Black Dragon one? Have you guys seen the Black Dragon Atlantean that's supposedly at 4 pounds and you can swing like an average longsword? If not, definitely check out Sword News where I do a little. You haven't? Okay, definitely check it out. Well, it's for sale on Sword Buyer's Guide store, and it's a little more expensive than the licensed Windlass. They run about $400-ish, $500-ish. But it's very, it looks authentic, but it still has that Ryan sword. Remember when I don't know if you guys remember when Ryan sword did an unlicensed Atlantean, but it technically, you could tell they're just using the hilt parts from Ryan's sword. They're very, the dragons are very like kind of, I don't know, they're more cut out looking, I guess. What's your dream sword? Ooh, if somebody said, here, Dave, we like you, we've been sticking around watching you for 3 hours and 14 minutes, I'm going to buy you whatever sword you want. I'd probably, dream sword would be something from Brendan Oswalski, Fable Blades. I would love for Breno to make me a sword. I almost bought a Breno sword, and it was one of his earlier models. It was like the Flame Sword or something like that. It's in his collection. It's one of his older fantasy swords. Kind of a crude-looking He-Man looking guy. Little on the cruder side because he wasn't really there yet as far as his refinement with making swords. But yeah, my ex-wife said no. He wanted like $1,000 for the sword. And he said, you know, Dave, I like you. I'll sell it to you for $600 because I'm kind of trying to get rid of it, and I like you. And I was like, he's selling it to me for $600, and she still said no. I don't know if you guys caught that joke in the map video, but I said, you know, there's a reason why she's an ex-wife. But anyway, yeah, a Brendan sword would be awesome, or something from Jeffrey Robinson. You know, those two guys make amazing swords. They're really great guys. I really like them. But if I was going to go production level, what's your best sword? Custom Alexandria. Yep. Yeah, David remembers. Yeah. You know, she saw that because she ended up watching it. And she was like, oh, I saw your live stream. And I was like, oh, yeah, what'd you think? And she's like, yeah. She kind of admitted, she wouldn't, but she did admit that she was kind of a stingy a stingy person back then when it came to money. So, you know, and that maybe she should have let me buy a few more swords because I wasn't as bad as she wanted to claim when we first started splitting. But anyway, yeah. What was I getting at? Oh, but no, like something from Brennan, something from Jeffrey would be awesome. If I was going to go production, Albion, you know, KF1 said custom Alexandria. I'm not a big 18C guy. I mean, I like them. I mean, I wouldn't mind one. I'd probably get like the Valor Arms Gen 3 Alexandria if I wanted one in the collection. But yeah, it's like 18Cs are cool, but they're not my end all be all. I know a lot of people love them because of their performance level of cutting and stuff, cutting tatami and stuff. Because, you know, and they're an awesome sword. It's a beautiful sword. 18C, nice, broad. You know, basically like a diamond cross section, big brother of the Type 14, and I'm a real big fan of Type 14s. But what was that? But no, if I had two Albions that I was going to get, like I said earlier in the video, the Discerner for sure, probably Arn's Templar sword, or like the Gedalt, because I love that Type A and the spike hilt. It's very traditional Norman-esque, you know, 12th century, 11th century-ish. But yeah, probably the Discerner. I'd get the Discerner. The sword John from Buy the Sword gifted me today is my new favorite sword and will be forever now, no matter what. Yeah. Hey, David. Yeah, I saw that. Did you see my my little GIF I sent you? That has a little Idaho humor. I don't know if you ever seen that film, Napoleon Dynamite, but that's where that little GIF was from. And he kind of does a lucky, you know, it's kind of a, you know, when he's kind of jealous of somebody. But yeah, all right, cool. But yeah, no, yeah, just thought but yeah, that's a cool story. That was cool of John for doing that to you. You look, you know, there's nothing better than seeing someone getting something new and exciting and you know, and it's like, you know, getting gifted something like a surprise like that. That was really cool. He sent that, and you know, it's really nice. I remember I had an experience like that with a old SBG member, William Swigger. He's one of the global moderators. A really great guy, beautiful, excellent, over-amassed sword collection. The guy's got more swords than you know, the dollar store's got ramen noodles. But he the thing with Will, he was kind of cleaning out a lot of his like budget stuff. Like, and this was like 12 years ago, 12, 14 years ago. And he basically did a classifieds thing. And he said, I'm not selling these swords. I'm not even wanting you to pay shipping. I just want to get rid of them. Put your name down and I'll send you a sword. I'm not guaranteeing you'll like it. I'm not guaranteeing that it'll be what you want. But if you PM me and say, give me a sword, anyway, he said, shoot me a PM, kind of tell me what you kind of would like, and I'll send you a sword. And my sword collection was pretty limited back then. I only had 2 European swords back then, and I think I had, because I had the Hanwei Practical had fallen apart, so I got rid of it. So I had my katana, my ninja toe, and then I had 2 European swords. I had the effigy and I had a Hanwei Tinker Bastard sword. And I told Will, I said, yeah, send me a sword, something. I'd love a long sword. I don't have a long sword. I'd love to have a long sword. And he sent me the Kos Iberia Mercenary sword, which I did. It was one of my first few written reviews. And a really cool sword, you know, kind of clunky and old beater style sword, but still a pretty cool sword. And anyway, that was something that he gifted me, and I was really excited to get and help build the collection. But yeah, you know, because I think when my collection was first budding, as far as European swords, I had 5 European swords, and it's because, like I said, it's like a Pringles thing. You know, what turned into, I want an arming sword, a long sword, a hand and a half sword, and a great sword. You know, I just need 4 European swords, turns into, ooh, now I need a, you know, Crusade era sword. I need a Renaissance era sword. I need a 14th century, you know, cut and thrust sword. And then that builds into, oh, well, I need every type from the typology. And that's what kind of built all this behind you is literally building the Oakeshott typology in a budget format. That's literally what my collection is, at least my European collection. Because if you look at it, every sword from the Vikings back is from the typology. Now I have a couple doubles, but that was kind of more not really my choice. That's why I'm really picky about what I buy too, because I normally, if I buy something, it's normally because, ooh, I want that for the typology. I need it. So for example, you know, I'd buy like the Royal Armories 50th Century Longsword. There are no Type 17s in the budget market. There isn't. The closest thing to a budget Type 17 on the market is the Royal Armories 15th Century Longsword, and it's still around $500. So it's technically mid-tier. But yeah, there's nothing. And so like back, 10 years ago when I was really, or 5, 6 years ago when I was really starting to focus on building my collection and adding that Oakeshott typology reference, there was the closest thing to a Type 17 was the Great Ouse River Sword from Windlass, and it had the wrong typology. It was primarily a skinny Type 16A, because when Windlass did their usual 2-dimensional build it from a picture, when they saw the Great Ouse River Sword, the original one, the 17.2 and Records of the Medieval Sword, and I love swords, using and collecting traditional to what the fuck fantasy. Me too. I like it all. You know, I'm more historically focused. I mean, obviously you see with the channel with the historical overview and kind of how I've been talking today. I mean, I'll talk all day about the Oakeshott typology. If they ever do a Jeopardy Oakeshott edition week or month, then you know that's where I make my retirement money, is hopefully getting on Jeopardy and talking Oakeshott typology. But yeah, no, it was like, but that's kind of what started it butted me in, is going through, and it's really hard to find a lot of budget accurate, you know, types. And that's why I'm really working Yeah, thanks. Yeah, going back to that Witcher pommel. Yeah, and it, that's what's cool. I got that just on a whim. Let me put away this big old guy. I got him on a whim. When me and my girlfriend Brianna, who was on the chat earlier and was on the chat with me and Matt, with the infamous, "Hey, we got a girl," I technically, we won't tell her because it's late and she's in bed, but this is technically her sword, even though I kind of claim it as my sword. I just claim it as in my collection because, it's easier that way in the videos and stuff. I mean, I bought it, but I bought it for her. This was one of my first gifts to her when we first started dating because she really likes swords. And, that was one of the things that attracted to us when we met was, usually, especially, since like recently I was, like I said, me and Brown have been together about the same time I've been doing the YouTube channel because I kind of started it just right before we got together. Can you hear me now? I think my mic died. All right, can you hear me better now? Probably not as good because my mic died. I guess, yeah, it's got a 3-hour battery life. But hopefully, since you can just hear me. Can you? Okay, cool. So I'll end this. Like I said, we've beat Matt and me anyway. It's almost 3.5 hours, so I beat me and Matt by a good half hour. So I'll probably cut it right at. We'll chat till 3 hours 30 minutes, and then I'll probably have to go and probably and I'm having a lot of fun with you guys. I could sit here all night and just chat with you guys. I'm having a lot of fun. I appreciate you guys doing this with me and supporting me and sharing this time with me on my first live feed. Believe me, I've had fun. There'll be more. Even if we don't try to wrap a sword handle, at least we'll sit here and get it out. And what's sad about that is I was really serious about wrapping a sword handle during this video. And honestly, if I would have stayed with it, I probably would have finished it by this time, 3 hours in. But yeah, I mean, I got all around the camera is literally my see here's like my leather die and my cutting tools, my everything here is for cutting that. Lives are the way to go. We come out for them. All right, so yeah, so at least the audio is good enough for this last few minutes. So I know it can be a little echoey without the mic. I know there was like a few complaints about my videos when I was doing an external mic where I was just having a mic here on the table and talking, and it wasn't really loud. But anyway, that's what I was hoping for. But yeah, so back to Brianna. So, like I said, it's hard because sometimes, especially if any of you guys that are kind of sword aficionados, sword enthusiasts, as I like to say, that are single, to 50-50 if, a girl's gonna like you if you like, that's so weird, you like swords, and then there's some that you get lucky and they like swords too, and a lot of gals do too. It's like go where your interests are. If you're into swords, go, there's a lot of beautiful women at ring fairs, go, or even on the girl side, there's a lot of nice guys or good looking guys, whatever, and even it doesn't matter if they're good looking or not, just nice guys, nice girls, at ring fairs and stuff like that, dojos, whatever, find someone that bumps in common. I got lucky with Brianna because, she kind of was, she kind of just got out there and was like, oh yeah, I like knives and swords. I was like, well, cool. I like swords too. And it kind of went from there. But anyway, yeah, so that was kind of the thing. So yeah, this is technically Brianna's Witcher sword. and she'll tell you that too if she ever gets on and chats again. She'll like, that's my sword. Don't let him tell you it's his sword. I've tried to trade it out, you know, and say, well, hey, what if, because I like it too, you know, and it's technically our sword, you know, it's on my collection rack, but I'm the one that polishes it when it starts getting dingy. But well, there you go. See, so maybe it's not such an odd duck. We'll tell her she has an awesome sword. I will. She knows she does. She's really proud of this guy. You know, a few of these swords are technically hers. She's got this one. It's buried, but she likes Viking swords too. She likes Viking swords. And everyone's like, oh, I don't like Viking swords. Well, of course, she doesn't really swing them around or use them, but she likes the aesthetic of Viking swords. And one of them that she really liked was the Windlass battle cry Malden sword, and then also the sea axe. I got, it's over here. It's kind of buried too. I'd have to dig, and we're trying to get off. But yeah, I got her the Malden sea axe and that. The Jakku Sino sword anniversary katana. I just did a cutting review and follow up on. That's technically her sword. I bought that katana for her. So yeah, quite a few of the swords are hers, and you know, like at least 5 or 6 of them, and she primarily likes Viking swords, and she's got this for kind of to scratch her longsword niche. But anyway, yeah. But yeah, I think that's it. You know, I'm having a lot of fun with you guys, but it is kind of getting late, and you know, the mics are dying and phones are dying and all that. So maybe this is where we call it. Haha, you will not make me buy an axe, dang it. Well, did I? Did you buy it? Because I got a few axes down here. You know, I got this Frankish axe from Windlass, which, you know, is a nice little throwing style axe. You know, here's a little shout out to my brother. He was playing with it one day, and he's like, this needs a grip. And he did like a nice little, you know, kind of more ahistorical, but still the nice thing, it's a paracord grip. He had a bunch of paracord from something, I don't know where he got all the paracord, but he's like went paracord crazy. He was for the live in it, yeah. But anyway, yeah, he did that paracord. So yeah, so there ain't nothing wrong with buying an axe or two, especially when they're on sale on especially museum replicas. They do a lot of the axe sales, you know, when they do that stuff. But anyway, yeah, glad you enjoyed the stream. Great stream. Thank you, KF1. Thank you, David. You know, maybe you won't have to buy that axe. You can just live it through me. I'll go do a full review and go chop up some stuff for it. I'll get some of those watermelons like some past commenters said, and we'll play executioner with some big old watermelons this summer. But anyway, yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for enjoying. Thanks for supporting the channel. You know, kind of like I guess I'll end it like I end my videos. You know, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Should do another stream for the handle wrap. I'll finish that handle wrap. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that handle wrap's going to get finished anyway. So I guess the next time I decide to sit down, you know, I got some editing to do for a review, just as a late night spoiler goodbye. I got a full review of the, you know, I'll show you this real quick before I go. If I can get it out. It's a wide guy. But the Tinqueta, I have a full review of that I'm editing right now. Things girls like about swords: flexibility, functionality, sharpness, present history. It's a thing. Great stream. All right. You know, if they are that intent, then yes, then send all the girls you know to Dynamo Sword Channel so they can get lectured on all of those great things, especially the history. But anyway, but yeah, Cinqueta should be out Monday. If I play my cards right and I get all the editing done, I should have this Cinqueta review out by either this weekend or Monday at the latest. So anyway, all right, guys, cool. We will talk to you later. Again, thanks for watching. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, A-Freak, KF1, David, Buy the Sword. You guys were kind of the top guys. So definitely shout out to you guys. Thanks for hanging out with me this whole time and chatting. I see I got 7 on, 6 on, off and on. I think the highest we got was 10. But hey, I would rather chat with 10 cool guys than, you know, 200 guys giving me a hard time heckling me. So thanks again, guys. Fist bump. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Anytime. And believe me, there'll be more.
So this was a lot of fun. Bye-bye, guys.